Tonight, we step into the damp washroom of a 1920s ZURICH milk can Scaldman, just as the first empty cans come back from the morning round. Settle in and let the work move slowly. The floor is wet under your boots. The air is warm with steam, and the metal handles of the cans are cold at first, until your hands learn their shape. You hear the city before you see much of it. A cartwheel passes outside on the stones, then another, softer now in the mist. Somewhere beyond the yard, a tram bell gives its small bright note, and the sound slips through the dairy door with the smell of horse leather, coal smoke, sour milk, and hot water. We're in Zurich in the 1920s, and your place tonight is not at the counter, not in the cowshed, not in the office where ledgers lie open, but here, beside the scalding trough, where the cans return empty, dented, and needing care. The milk and Scaldman begins before the city has fully decided to wake. He stands in an apron that has gone stiff at the edges from old splashes, with sleeves rolled past the wrist and a cloth tucked where he can reach it without looking. You can feel the cloth already damp against your fingers. It smells faintly of soap, tin, and the mineral breath of water that has been boiled many times. The room itself breathes in slow pulses, as steam gathers on the window panes, runs down in clear threads, and disappears into the shine on the sill. There is no hurry in this first motion. A can is lifted from the row, tilted, checked, and set near the trough. Its lid is separate, sometimes still clinging to a ring of cream at the rim. You run a finger along the lip, not delicately, but with the plain attention of someone who knows where residue hides. The work is simple enough to describe, yet it asks for patience. Milk leaves a film. Warmth wakes its smell. A careless rinse becomes tomorrow's sourness, and so the Scaldman gives each vessel the same calm regard. In the dairy yards of 1920s Zurich, the milk can had already traveled farther than its quiet shape suggests. It may have begun before dawn in a village above the lake, or in a farm shed where a lantern hung low and a cow shifted her weight in straw. The fresh milk was strained, cooled as well as the season allowed, and poured into metal cans that knocked against one another on carts and small wagons. By the time the city had taken what it needed, the empty cans came back with their own message, written in smell, dents, and drying streaks. You learned to read them without making a story too large. This one held milk that had warmed a little on the route. This one was sealed well, but its lid was set down on a dirty board. This one came from a careful hand, and the inside is almost sweet. The Scaldman notices these things in the same way a baker notices flour on a sleeve, or a typesetter notices a worn letter in a tray. We notice them with him, quietly, because much of working life was held together by such small observations, repeated until they became a kind of second sight. The first task is the rinse, not the true scald yet, only the loosening. You take the can, angle it over the drain, and let the last pale threads run out. They are thin now, almost blue-white against the darker floor. Then water enters with a hollow rush. It strikes the bottom, climbs the sides, and comes back carrying the faint ghost of milk with it. The sound is round and enclosed, a private weather inside the can. Your hands turn the metal body, and the can answers with a dull clunk against the wooden rack. The water is not silent work. It speaks in taps, splashes, and soft knocks, and after a while your ear separates them without effort. A clean can rings differently from one still coated. A loose handle complains. A lid dropped too sharply tells everyone in the room that someone's fingers are tired. The Zurich milk can Scaldman hears all of this beneath the ordinary murmur of the dairy, beneath the scrape of boots, the passing cough, the little hiss from the boiler, and the measured breathing of steam. In those years, the city depended on milk with a seriousness that is easy to forget. Milk went into morning coffee, into children's cups, into kitchens where soup was stretched and porridge thickened. It was carried in cans, ladled in shops, poured into household jugs, and trusted because people had learned to trust the chain of hands behind it. The Scaldman's hands were part of that chain. They did not milk the cow or sell the measure, yet the cleanliness of the empty can shaped the safety of the next full one. You do not think about that all at once while you work. Most workers do not carry grand meanings in every movement. You think about the heat of the handle, the way the steam wets your face, the patch of floor that is slicker than the rest. You think about keeping your rhythm. Lift, tip, rinse, inspect. Turn the lid, set it aside, reach for the next. The day narrows kindly around the task, and the mind rests in the space between one can and another. The scalding trough waits with its own steady presence. It may be a long metal basin, or a heavy vat lined for heat, fed by water brought near boiling, sometimes helped by steam from the boiler that serves the dairy's other needs. The surface trembles faintly. When the can goes in, the room changes for a moment. Heat blooms upward. The old smell of milk loosens and vanishes into the sharper, clean smell of scalded metal. You hold the can with a hook or gloved hand, steadying it while the hot water climbs into every seam. Scalding is a word with a sting in it, but the work itself is measured. The milk can Scaldman does not fling or rush. He lowers, turns, waits, and drains. The hot water must touch what cold rinsing cannot persuade. It must reach the rim, the rolled edge, the lid groove, the places where fat can cling like a faint memory. We follow the can as it rolls in the heat, and we feel how the job depends not on force, but on repetition that has been learned into the wrists. When the can is lifted, it steams like a small chimney. Drops run down the sides and fall from the base in quick, bright beads. You set it inverted on a rack, where air can enter and water can leave. The rack is simple, perhaps wood darkened by years of damp, perhaps metal worn smooth at the contact points. It holds the can's mouth down in patient rows. In that position, they look less like containers and more like resting bells, each with its own small silence inside. The lids receive their turn. They are easier to handle, but easier to neglect. A careless person might think a lid is only a lid. You know better. The underside catches cream. The rim holds dust. The little place where fingers lift it can bring the street back into the dairy if it is not washed well. So you dip, scrub, scald, and set each lid in order. By now your hands know which motion belongs to which size, and you do not need to look every time. Outside, Zurich keeps moving in its composed way. The Limmat carries its grey-green water through the city. Shop shutters open. A bicycle leans by a wall. The morning tram takes office clerks, apprentices, and women carrying baskets toward streets that smell of bread, damp wool, and coal. Inside the dairy washroom, the milk can Scaldman remains with the returning vessels, and the scale of his world is smaller, warmer and louder with water. Yet the city's breakfast passes through this room as surely as it passes through the baker's oven. This is one reason we lost him slowly, and not all at once. The Scaldman belonged to a system built around return. Cans came in, cans went out, and the same metal bodies moved between farm, dairy, shop, and household again and again. Their usefulness depended on hands that could restore them. But the 1920s were already asking different questions. How much milk could be handled in one place? How clean could a machine make a vessel? How far could a lorry travel before dawn? How much trust could be placed in sealed bottles, in pasteurizing rooms, in equipment that did not tire at the end of a shift? For now, though, we stay beside him. We do not hurry ahead to what replaced him. The can before you still needs washing, and the steam is still rising. A dent near the shoulder catches your thumb. It is shallow, but it holds a line of residue, so you turn the brush and work the bristles into that small curve. The brush is stiff, its wooden handle dark with use, and the fibers rasp against metal with a sound like a broom on a wet step. The brush has its own place in the rhythm. Too hard, and your arm is tired before midday. Too soft, and the can is not ready. The Scaldman learns that quiet middle pressure, the kind that does the work without announcing itself. You can feel it now, through wrist and palm. There is a dull resistance at first, then a smoother glide as the surface clears. The water clouds clears again and runs away through the drain, carrying with it what yesterday left behind. The drain is part of the room's music. It gulps sometimes, it whispers at other times. Milk water, soap water, scalding water, All of it finds the floor's slight slope and gathers where iron grating waits. There may be a smell there, not foul when tended well, but earthy, warm and faintly sour, like a cellar where something has been washed many times. You keep your boots planted carefully. The floor can shine beautifully and still be treacherous, and old workers respect shine when it comes from water. There are other people near you, though the Scaldman's place is distinct. A driver brings in a cluster of cans and says little, because he has another round to make. A dairy woman counts lids and marks a note. Someone in the next room moves crates, and the wood knocks against wood with the soft regularity of chores. You may hear the low murmur of Swiss German, a few words traded through steam, ordinary and practical. The room does not need much conversation. Its work is already speaking. The can numbers matter. Marks stamped or painted on metal tell where a vessel belongs. A farm, a route, a supplier, a dairy account. The Scaldman may not keep the main ledger, but he knows the signs. He knows which cans are old and heavy, which lids fit poorly, which handles pinch the skin if lifted the wrong way. In a trade that looks repetitive from outside, each object carries small differences. You learn them, because your day becomes easier when the world is allowed to be specific. At mid-morning, the light changes on the windows. Steam still clouds the panes, but beyond it, the day brightens, and the room loses some of its early grey. The work does not become beautiful in a polished way. It remains wet, warm, plain, and necessary. Yet there is beauty in rows of clean cans catching light along their curved sides. There is beauty in the way each inverted vessel gives back a muted glow, not shining like silver, but like something ready to serve again. You pause only briefly. Perhaps there is coffee, dark and warm, held in a cup with thick sides. Perhaps there is bread wrapped in cloth, eaten standing near a dry patch of wall where the heat from the boiler gathers. The bread smells of crust and flour, and the coffee tastes a little bitter after the sweet dampness of milk air. Your hands remain marked by the work. Even when dried on the apron, they carry the scent of soap and metal, and the skin around the knuckles feels softened by water. A Scaldman's break is not a leaving. The room remains in view. The next row of cans waits without impatience. Workplaces like this have a way of keeping time through objects, and you know how much of the morning remains by the length of the unwashed line. We stand there with him for a moment, letting the cup warm the palm, listening as the boiler ticks and settles, and as someone outside leads a horse across the yard with a soft clatter of shoes on stone. Then the rhythm gathers again. The can is lifted, tipped, rinsed, brushed, scalded, drained, and placed on the rack. Each verb becomes physical. Each motion has weight. The Zurich milk can Scaldman is not making a finished thing that a passerby will admire. He is returning usefulness to something already made. That kind of labor often disappears from memory first, because it leaves no carved date, no grand machine in a museum, no dramatic photograph of a man posed with his tool. It leaves cleanliness, and cleanliness is meant to vanish into trust. This vanishing is part of why his role feels so quiet now. When sanitation improves, the worker who guarded it can become invisible. When bottles arrive sealed, when washing machines enclose the rinsing and scalding behind metal doors, when regulations describe temperatures and timing in neat language, the old figure at the trough becomes harder to picture. The task survives, but the person thins into a process. We lost the Scaldman not because washing stopped, but because washing was gathered into systems that no longer needed one man's whole day shaped around the can. Still, the human rhythm matters. Before automation, clean milk depended on judgment repeated hundreds of times. The Scaldman noticed when water cooled too much. He felt when a brush had softened and needed replacing. He smelled when a can had stood too long before rinsing. These were not heroic skills. They were workshop skills, yard skills, the quiet intelligence of someone whose hands had spent years near the same materials. You can almost feel that knowledge settling into your own palms as the morning continues. The cans themselves were changing too. Older containers could be heavy, awkward, and scarred by use. Their seams and rolled edges asked for careful washing. Newer designs sought smoother interiors and better closures. As dairies modernized, the vessel became less like a familiar individual and more like a standardized part in a larger flow. That made sense. It saved time. It helped cleanliness. It served the growing city. but it also meant fewer moments when a worker stood face to face with each can, reading its dents like a small history. By late morning, the warm room has marked everything. Your hairline is damp, your shirt clings lightly at the back, the apron's front is darkened where water has splashed and dried and splashed again. The air tastes mineral and faintly sweet. When you breathe in, you get steam, soap, and the ghost of milk. When you breathe out, the room seems to take it calmly, adding your breath to all the other breath of the work. There is a softness in repeated labor when no one is shouting and no bell is driving the hands faster than they can go. The Scaldman's day is not easy, and we should not pretend it is. Arms ache, backs stiffen, hot water reddens the skin, and winter mornings can make the yard outside feel like another world. Yet within the labor there is steadiness. You know what comes next. The can waits, the water waits, the rack receives what has been cleaned. A person can rest, a little, in knowing the order of things. The city, beyond the dairy walls, was becoming less patient with older orders. Zurich in the 1920s was not a sleepy place preserved under glass. It was modern, careful, industrious, full of shops, schools, banks, workshops, public rules, electric light, tram lines, and a growing faith in systems that could measure and improve daily life. Milk was part of that faith. It could be tested, it could be cooled, it could be pasteurized, it could be delivered in cleaner ways with less exposure to air, hands, dust, and weather. When pasteurization rooms expanded, the Scaldman's world shifted. Pasteurization did not remove the need to clean containers, but it changed where people placed their confidence. The milk itself passed through controlled heat, held and cooled with care, and that process gave dairies a new center of attention. Washing remained essential, yet it became one piece of a larger chain. You can picture the old scalding trough still working nearby, steam rising as before, while in another room gauges, tanks, and pipes began to speak the language of modern dairy science. The soundscape altered slowly. A manual trough has splashes, knocks, and the scrape of brushes. A bottle washer has belts, jets, and a steadier mechanical churn. A larger dairy has pumps, valves, and a hum that does not belong to one worker's pace. To us, lying here in the quiet of imagination, those changes can feel almost musical. One rhythm fades beneath another. The hand keeps working for a time. Then the machine takes more of the motion and the person steps back, tends, checks, adjusts, and no longer carries the whole task in his shoulders. But in the 1920s washroom, there is still the close work. Another can arrives with a chalk mark blurred by damp. You steady it between your boots and loosen the lid. A cool smell rises first, faintly grassy, like the last memory of the farmyard before the heat takes it. Then comes the rinse, and the smell thins. The brush enters, circles, lifts. Water strikes metal. Steam folds around your sleeves. The can emerges changed, though almost nothing visible has happened. That is the strange satisfaction of cleaning work. Its success is the absence of evidence. No stain, no sourness, no sticky rim, nothing to point at, except readiness. The milk can Scaldman's pride, if we can call it pride, must have been a quiet and practical one. A row of clean cans meant the next journey could begin. It meant a driver would not wait. It meant a dairy woman would not complain of lids mixed or vessels left wet. It meant the morning had been put back in order. We can imagine him with habits that never reached any record. Perhaps he set troublesome cans to the left until he had time to inspect them. Perhaps he kept the best brush hidden from careless hands. Perhaps he knew that one corner of the rack dried faster because a draft came through a cracked pane. These little arrangements are the true furniture of a working life. They are rarely written down, but they make the day livable, and they give the worker a small, private mastery over the room. The noon hour approaches without ceremony. The line of cans has shortened. The first racks are nearly dry. The air feels less crowded now, though warmth still clings to the walls. Outside, the city has crossed fully into day. Voices are clearer. A door opens and brings in a brief ribbon of cooler air, carrying street dust, damp stone, and the smell of something cooking nearby. For a moment, steam pulls toward the opening as if it too would like to see the street. By midday, the work has changed from the heavy return of morning to the steady attending of what must be ready for the next round. The Zurich milk and Scaldman now moves among rows instead of piles, checking dryness, matching lids, turning vessels that have held too much water along a seam. You lift one can and feel the last warmth stored in its body. It is lighter when dry, or seems so because it no longer drips on your trousers and boots. A dry can has a different confidence in the hand. Drying sounds quieter than washing. There is no rush of water now, only the soft touch of cloth, and the occasional ring as metal meets metal. You wipe the mouth where drops gather. You glance inside and see a grey shine with no film. Light enters the opening and curves along the interior wall. The can smells clean in the old way, not perfumed, not sterile as a modern room might seem, but clean with hot water, air, and time. The Scaldman works with time as much as water. Too soon, and a can is put away wet. Too late, and the route may be delayed. In winter, drying can be stubborn. In summer, sourness can come quickly if the first rinsing waits. So the day asks him to know temperature, not as a number only, but as a feeling in the room. He knows when the window should be opened a little. He knows when the steam is too thick. He knows when the rack is crowded and the cans need more space to breathe. This is another way we lost him. Modern systems prefer conditions that can be written, checked, and repeated without leaning so heavily on one person's senses. There is wisdom in that. Measured heat protects better than guesswork. Designed drainage prevents hidden damp. Stainless steel resists what older surfaces could hold. Yet the passing of the Scaldman also meant the passing of a certain kind of bodily knowledge, the kind that lived between thumb, ear, nose, and habit, and did not always have a neat sentence for itself. For lunch, if the day allows it, the Scaldman may step outside the wet room. You feel the change at once. The air in the yard is cooler on your face, and your skin seems to wake beneath it. A bench, a low wall, or the side of a crate becomes enough. Bread again, perhaps cheese, perhaps a small sausage wrapped in paper, perhaps an apple with its skin polished against the apron before the first bite. The food tastes stronger because the morning has been water and steam. The yard has its own slow inventory. Empty crates, a broom leaning where someone left it, damp tracks from wheels, a cat moving carefully beneath a cart. The dairy building gives off warmth through its walls, and the windows are clouded from inside. We stand there with him, not for drama, but for the small relief of air that has not been boiled. The city is close, yet the yard feels set apart, a back room of urban life where necessities arrive, leave, and return again. When he goes back in, the warmth wraps around him like a second coat. The afternoon is lighter work in some seasons, heavier in others, depending on deliveries, returns, and the dairy's size. The Scaldman may repair small troubles now. A bent rim is noted, a lid that no longer fits snugly is set aside. A handle rivet is watched. He is not always the tinsmith, not always the man who fixes, yet he is the first to notice when an object is drifting toward failure. A bad lid can waste a morning's care. Dust enters, milk spills, a customer complains. So the Scaldman's inspection belongs to cleanliness and to economy at once. Nothing in such a place is separate for long. Hygiene, time, money, trust, and labor all meet at the rim of a can. You can see that rim now, rolled smooth from manufacture, bright where countless hands have touched it, marked where the years have given it small scars. The more we stay with him, the clearer the loss becomes. We did not lose the need for washing. We lost the visible worker whose whole identity gathered around one humble task. As dairies grew larger, the scalding of cans became a station, then a machine cycle, then a hidden part of plant sanitation. The name thinned first. A man might become a washer, a dairy hand, a sanitation worker, a machine operator. The old title, if it was spoken at all, would sound too narrow for the new arrangement. Names fade when work changes shape. The lamplighter becomes a maintenance crew. The lift boy becomes a button panel. The hand compositor becomes a keyboard and a plate room. The milk can Scaldman becomes part of the dairy's wash system. And then, When cans themselves decline in daily use, even that memory loosens. We can hold the name gently tonight, not to argue with progress, but to notice the person who stood at the warm trough and made tomorrow's milk possible. In the afternoon, the light lies higher on the wall. Steam turns it soft around the edges. Your arms have settled into a slower rhythm because the hardest wave has passed. There is time now to hear small sounds that morning hid. A drop falls from the end of a rack. A lid shifts as it cools. Somewhere in the building, a door latch clicks, and a voice answers from another room. The boiler breathes with a patient, iron sound. You take another can, though now it may be one held back for extra care. It has a sourness that the first rinse did not clear. You do not scold the can, you simply give it time. More hot water, a firmer brushing, a longer rest in the scald. Work like this has a tenderness without softness. It handles the stubborn thing properly. It does not rush past what needs attention, because neglect returns later, and usually at a worse hour. There is comfort in such practical patience. Many old jobs taught it, not through sayings, but through consequences. Bread must rise, ink must be set, a lock gate must open only when the water is right. A milk can must be clean before it is filled again. The Zurich milk can Scaldman lives in that same quiet family of workers whose days were shaped by materials that would not be hurried beyond their nature. Metal, milk, water, heat, and air each kept their own pace. As afternoon leans on, the question of why we lost him becomes less like a mystery and more like a soft folding of causes. The city grew, milk routes lengthened, public health rules became more exact, central dairies invested in equipment, bottles and later cartons changed the journey from cow to kitchen. Motor transport altered timing, refrigeration changed what could be expected, and the humble returnable can, once so central to the daily chain, no longer needed the same man beside the same trough in quite the same way. Yet no change arrives everywhere at once. For years, old and new stand together. A Scaldman might work beside newer apparatus. A dairy might bottle some milk and still send cans elsewhere. Farm suppliers might still return dented vessels to be washed by hand. A young worker might learn the machine first and the trough only when something failed. An older man might trust his hands more than any gauge, while still admitting that the new washer saved time when it behaved. We can imagine the conversations, quiet and ordinary, not grand debates about modernity, just remarks over wet floors and lunch paper. This machine uses less time. That valve sticks. The old cans are heavier. The new lids fit better. The inspector is coming Thursday. The water should be hotter. The route from the hill farms was late again. Such talk carries history in work clothes. It does not announce an era ending. It only tries to get through the day properly. The Scaldman's body knows the cost of the old way. By late afternoon, your shoulders have a dull pull. Your palms feel softened and tender where wet cloth and metal have rubbed them. If cold air comes in too quickly, the damp shirt chills against your back. There may be a red place on the wrist from a splash that was not serious, only sharp for a breath. The work is gentle in mood tonight, but it was not weightless. Calm labor can still be labor. That honesty matters. To romanticize him too brightly would be another way of losing him. He was not a symbol first. He was a worker in a warm, wet room, doing a needed job for wages, under time, with tired hands. The beauty is not that the work was easy. The beauty is that it had order, skill, and usefulness, and that a person could become quietly expert in something most customers never saw. You can respect that without polishing away the ache. As the afternoon shift settles into its last steady stretch, the Scaldman turns from washing to readiness. The clean cans must be placed where drivers can take them without confusion. Lids must match. Marks must face outward. Anything damaged must not slip back into use simply because the hour is late. You move more slowly now, but perhaps more carefully too, because the end of a day tests attention. Many mistakes happen when a person has already begun to imagine going home. The room begins to open around the completed work. Where rows of dirty cans stood, there is floor again. Where lids were piled, there are stacks. The drains still glisten, but the water runs clearer. The air cools a little as the scalding slows. A window is opened wider. and Zurich enters with evening on it, carrying the smell of river damp, tram electricity, chimney smoke, and stone that has held a day's mild warmth. This is the hour when a workplace shows its bones. Without the press of the morning, you see the worn boards, the hooks, the patched hose, the pale marks on the wall where steam has touched for years. You notice the place where a worker always stands, because the floor is slightly more polished there. You notice how the rack leans a little and still does its duty. You notice because we are moving at the Scaldman's pace now, and his pace has taught us to look where use has left its fingerprints. The final cans of the day are not less deserving. They get the same rinse, the same heat, the same inspection. That sameness is the moral center of routine work. The first can and the last can both go out into tomorrow. A child's cup will not know whether its milk came from the beginning of the line or the end, so you lift and turn and drain, even with the day in your arms, because the task asks to be completed in the way it began. There may be a clock in the room, though steam may have softened its face. Its ticking is less noticeable than the boiler, but in quieter moments it returns. Each minute lands gently. The milk can Scaldman does not need to stare at it. He knows the hour from light, from the number of cans left, from the shift in voices beyond the door. Workplaces before constant screens often had many clocks besides the clock. Shadows, bells, meal smells, traffic, fatigue, and habit all told time together. When evening comes nearer, the washed cans are ready for darkness. They stand clean and dry, open to air, lids waiting or placed according to the dairy's custom. Their bodies hold a dull shine, and the dents are still there, but harmless now. A dent is not dirt. A scar is not failure. The Scaldman has not made them new. He has made them fit for use, and much of life depends on that humbler restoration. This is perhaps the deepest reason the role faded so quietly. It did not produce a spectacle. It supported a flow. Once the flow changed, the worker disappeared into new names and new rooms. There was no last ceremonial scalding. No city crowd gathered to watch the final can lifted from the trough. More likely, there was simply a day when fewer cans came back, then fewer still, and a machine took more of the washing, and the man who had known the old rhythm was assigned elsewhere, retired, or not replaced. A vanished job often ends like that, not with a door slammed, but with a door used less often, not with a speech, but with a bench cleared. The trough remains for a while, then becomes storage, then is removed during a renovation. Someone younger asks what it was for. Someone older explains, briefly, because the day is busy. The answer is true, but too small to hold the steam, the sore hands, the winter mornings, the rows of cans ringing softly on the rack. So tonight we stay a little longer than history usually stays. We let the Zurich milk can Scaldman finish properly. He wipes the edge of the trough. He hangs the brush where air can reach it. He checks that no lid has slipped behind a crate. The cloth in his hand is grey with use, and when he rinses it, the water runs cloudy for a moment, then clears. He wrings it once, firmly, and lays it where it will dry by morning. The boiler settles into quieter sounds. The room loses its thickest heat. Without the rush of work, you hear the building itself, a pipe ticking, a board giving a small creak, a drip still falling somewhere into a shallow puddle. The Scaldman's boots make softer marks now. He walks the room not as a man beginning, but as one making sure the day can be left. There is a kindness in that final inspection. It is a way of saying the work mattered enough to close with care. And when the last bright work has been done, the room asks for a different kind of attention, the slower attention of leaving no trouble behind for the morning. You lean the handled hook against its place on the wall, and you notice how warm the metal still feels where your palm has held it. The scalding trough gives off a low breath, not quite steam now, more like a memory of heat. We can stand beside it for a while, feeling the floor cool under the soles of our boots. The Zurich milk can Scaldman does not leave the dairy by vanishing from the room in one quick motion. He leaves it by degrees, first by closing a valve, then by shifting a rack, then by rinsing a patch of floor where milk water has dried into a faint pale crescent. You can hear the broom bristles move through the dampness with a soft, sandy whisper. The smell changes as the water thins. There is less sour milk now, less soap, and more stone, wet wood, and evening air. A person who has worked all day with hot water carries the room home on his skin. Even after washing, there is a trace of metal under the fingernails, and a tenderness across the knuckles. You may feel it as he rolls his sleeves down, slowly, because cloth over wet warmed arms can feel almost cold at first. His shirt has dried in uneven places. His apron is heavier than it was in the morning. If he hangs it on a peg, it does not fall softly, but with the dull weight of a thing that has absorbed the day. Outside, Zurich has entered the hour when windows begin to glow before the sky is fully dark. The dairy yard is quieter, though not silent. A late cart turns somewhere beyond the gate. A bicycle bell rings, small and practical. The tram wires make their faint overhead hum, and the street stones hold the smell of damp dust. We step out with the Scaldman only in imagination, feeling the change from steam to open air, from the close washroom to a city washed in blue evening. He might live close enough to walk, as many workers did, moving through streets that had their own daily trades and their own small exhaustions. Bakeries cooling after the hot hours, shops closing shutters, tailors lifting pins from hems, clerks folding papers under lamps. Zurich was full of such endings, each one ordinary, each one necessary. The milk can Scaldman passes through them with the quiet privacy of a man whose work has happened behind the door, where customers rarely thought to look. You can imagine his hands as he walks. They may stay slightly open at his sides, fingers thickened by water and use, or they may fold around a lunch tin now empty except for crumbs. The palms know the roundness of cans even when no can is there. That is how repetitive labor lingers. The body keeps the circle, the lift, the tilt. Long after the work has stopped for the day, the muscles remember the curve of the task, and the mind rests inside that remembered motion. In the old milk trade, morning and evening belonged to each other more closely than people outside the work might understand. A can cleaned at dusk was not finished only for itself. It was being prepared for a dawn not yet visible, for a driver not yet awake, for cows still lying in straw, for a household that would set out a jug after breakfast. We can feel the chain lengthening softly through the dark. Nothing in it is dramatic. Everything in it depends on the next careful hand. The milk can Scaldman was one of those hands, and his disappearance came partly because the chain became longer, smoother, and more enclosed. Instead of many visible pauses where people touched, judged, and corrected, newer systems tried to carry milk through pipes, tanks, pumps, bottles, caps, crates, and cold rooms with fewer open moments. The aim was sensible. Fewer open moments meant fewer chances for dust, warmth, and careless handling. Yet each enclosed improvement also hid another piece of the old work from view. If we return, gently, to the washroom before dawn, we can feel why the older system needed him so much. Cold has settled into the building overnight. The windows are black. A thin line of frost may sit along the sill in winter, while the floor inside remembers yesterday's dampness. When the boiler is lit, its warmth comes slowly, spreading first as sound, then as a smell of coal or coke, then as a tremor in the pipes. You wait with the room as it wakes. The first water of the day is never quite like the rest. It carries the chill of pipes, the dull taste of metal, the flat sound of a building not yet awake. The Zurich milk can Scaldman learns to let the system come properly to heat before trusting it with the day's cans. He may test with a handheld near steam, or by watching how the surface moves, or by listening to the sharper note water gives when it is truly hot. These are small tests, almost invisible, but they hold the whole morning steady. There is a world of difference between water that is merely warm and water that can do the work asked of it. Milk fat clings kindly until it doesn't, and then it turns stubborn. A lukewarm rinse spreads it. A proper scald loosens it and sends it away. You can picture the Scaldman standing with one shoulder slightly raised against the chill, waiting for the heat to arrive, not wasting effort too soon. Patience, in such a room, is not a virtue framed on a wall. It is a practical tool. The cans arrive with the dawn roots. and each arrival brings a little of the outside into the dairy. Mud on a base ring, straw caught near a handle, a lid damp from fog. The smell of morning milk still sits inside the metal, sweet but already changing. You notice how quickly that sweetness can become something heavier if the can is left unattended. This is why the work begins promptly. Not hurried, not frantic, but prompt in the old laboring sense, where attention is the first kindness given to a material. The scaldman's routine may begin with sorting before washing. Some cans are nearly clean, some need extra scraping, and some must be set aside because a seam has trapped what it should not. You turn them so the marks face out. You arrange lids nearby, because a lid separated too long can cause confusion later. There is a modest intelligence in this ordering. We may think of washing as one task, but in practice it is many small decisions, each saving a little trouble downstream. A dented can demands its own pace. A deep dent can make a hidden pocket where water does not strike cleanly, and the scaldman knows to angle the brush into that place. You feel the bristles catch, then release. The sound is duller there. A smooth wall sings under the brush, while a dent murmurs. These differences are not poetic to the worker at first. They are simply information. Yet at night, as we listen softly, the information becomes part of the room's quiet music. The lids form another small landscape. Some are round and obedient. Some have rims that sit unevenly, so they wobble when stacked. A few bear scratches from years of being lifted with hurried fingers. You take them one by one, feeling their thin edges, turning them under the hot water until steam beads and runs. A lid can flash with heat more quickly than a can, and you learn to shift it before it burns the fingertips. The motion becomes quick, but never abrupt. This kind of work trains attention without asking for speech. The mind may wander a little, but the hands remain present. You can think of the weather, of a bill due at home, of whether the bread will be fresh when you pass the shop, and still your fingers will know when a handle is loose. The scaldman's day allows that soft division. Part of him is with the can. Part of him is with the city. Part of him is nowhere in particular, simply resting inside repetition. The disappearance of his role was helped along by the rise of equipment that did not need such divided attention. A machine washer could spray many bottles or cans with controlled force, and it did not drift into private thoughts. It repeated because repetition was built into its gears and jets. The worker still mattered, of course, but the center of care moved. Instead of touching each vessel in full, he might load, monitor, unload, and check. The old intimacy with every can became less possible, and eventually less useful. We should let that change remain balanced in our minds. The newer methods helped protect families who depended on milk every day. In crowded cities, with children especially, cleaner systems mattered deeply. Pasteurized milk, better cooling, sealed containers, and regulated dairies reduced risks that people in earlier generations knew too well. The scaldman was part of that movement towards safer milk, and then the same movement carried the work beyond him. Progress can honor a worker's purpose while making his exact job disappear. Inside the 1920s dairy, the evidence of public health was already present in ordinary ways. There might be posted rules about washing. There might be inspections. There might be records of suppliers, temperatures, and returns. The scaldman may not read every notice closely, but he works within their pressure. You can imagine a supervisor reminding the room that the inspector has been through, or that cans must not stand unrinsed. The words pass quickly, but they tighten the order of the day. Cleanliness in such a place is not a pure white idea. It is damp, laborious, and constantly renewed. It has grey cloths, reddened hands, scoured wood, flushed drains, and steam on the eyebrows. It smells of soap that is not fancy and water that has worked hard. You make cleanliness again and again because the world keeps using things. A milk can that was clean yesterday is not clean by right today. It must be returned to cleanliness through action, and the scaldman is the person who performs that return. This returning is what gives the job its soft hypnotic shape. The can leaves, the can comes back, the can is washed, the can leaves again. The city drinks, cooks, feeds children, empties jugs, and sends vessels onward. We follow the circle until it becomes almost like breathing. Inhale, use. Exhale, clean. The cycle is plain, and because it is plain, It can hold a listener gently, the way a slow wheel holds the motion of water at a mill. There were seasonal changes too, and the Scaldman would have felt them more than a customer ever did. In winter, cold milk stayed calm longer, but the washroom could bite at the hands before the steam filled it. Coats hung near the door would smell of damp wool. Breath might show in the yard. Metal handles could feel almost painfully cold at first grip. You would welcome the trough's heat then, even as it turned the room cloudy and made the windows run. In summer, the problem changed. Warmth hurried everything. Milk residue soured more quickly, and the smell in an unrinsed can became stronger before noon. The washroom might feel close, its air heavy against the chest, the apron sticking, and the hair damp at the temples. Flies had to be discouraged. Doors could not stand open as freely. You learned to work early with special steadiness, before the day grew thick, and you understood why water, heat, and promptness mattered. Spring brought mud on the can bases and lighter air through the yard. Autumn brought a sharper smell from leaves in the street, and a darker morning when the first carts arrived. None of this changed the basic motion, but it changed the feeling around the motion. The Zurich milk and Scaldman worked inside a calendar written in temperature, dampness, and smell. We can follow that calendar without needing dates, because the body understands seasons before the ledger names them. The farms sending milk into Zurich carried their own seasonal rhythm. Grass changed the milk's character. Weather changed roads. Snow changed timing. A wet morning could mean more dirt on the lower part of the cans, while a dry spell might bring dust instead. The Scaldman did not need to visit every farm to know that the countryside had arrived. It came in on the metal. It came in as straw, chill, mud, and the faint green sweetness that sometimes lingered before washing. Each can was a traveler, and the Scaldman was the keeper of its pause between journeys. That thought may be larger than he would have used, but it helps us remain with the work. A vessel is not only an object when it moves daily through many hands. It becomes a small agreement. The farmer fills it. The carrier protects it. The dairy empties it. The Scaldman cleans it. The route sends it back. Trust is not one grand promise, but many small promises kept in order. In the 1920s, Zurich's appetite for order suited this kind of system, even as it helped replace parts of it. Swiss urban life valued precision, cleanliness, punctuality, and reliable public services. Those values did not fall from the sky. They were built by workers in rooms like this, where daily reliability was made with hot water and aching arms. When the newer dairy plants arrived with their smoother flows, they were not rejecting the Scaldman's values. They were enlarging them into machinery, inspection, and scale. Still, scale changes what a worker feels. In a smaller washroom, you can know the day by sight. In a larger plant, the work may arrive as an endless stream. The can loses its individual story. The worker loses the sense that this one vessel, with this dent and this lid, has passed through his hands before. We can hear the emotional difference in the sound itself. The old room knocks and splashes. The new one hums and cycles. Both are useful, but they ask different things of the person standing there. The Scaldman's tools were few enough to become familiar. Brushes of different sizes, hooks or tongs for lifting hot metal, cloths for rims and final wiping, racks that allowed air to do its slow share, perhaps a scraper for stubborn dried residue, though used carefully. Each tool had a place, and a tool returned to its place made the next motion easier. You know this feeling if you have ever cooked in a small kitchen or worked at a bench where the hand reaches before the eyes. There is quiet comfort in a well-placed tool. The hook leans where steam will not make the handle slick. The brush hangs bristles down, not resting in dirty water. The cloth is rinsed before it turns useless. Such habits look minor until they are missing. Then the whole room stumbles. A misplaced brush costs a minute. A dirty cloth spreads what it should remove. A rack set too close slows drying. The Scaldman's expertise lives in preventing these tiny frictions from growing. We are not watching a spectacle. We are watching maintenance, and maintenance is one of the deepest forms of care in any society. It keeps bridges from failing, lamps from going dark, presses from jamming, and milk from turning unsafe in the vessel before it reaches a kitchen. The milk can Scaldman belongs to that family of maintainers. He works where the public sees only the result. The result is ordinary life continuing smoothly, which is why the worker is so easily forgotten. The forgetting can begin even among those who benefit. A customer thinks of milk as arriving. A child thinks of it as being poured. A shopkeeper thinks of measures, payments, and regular buyers. Few think of the damp room where emptiness is made clean enough to become useful again. That hidden place is where we are tonight. We give it time, not because it was glamorous, but because it was not. The plainness is the point, and the plainness has its own calm dignity. In the old washroom, sounds mark distance. A close sound is the splash at your wrist. A middle sound is another worker stacking crates. A far sound is a tram, softened by walls and steam. This layering helps the mind settle. You know where you are because the sounds have depth. The hot water is near. The city is beyond. The river is farther still, though perhaps not heard at all, only imagined as a cool presence moving through Zurich while the dairy breathes heat. The smell of the room is layered in the same way. Fresh milk residue has a sweet edge. Older milk has a sourer note. Soap brings a bitter cleanliness. Coal heat adds smoke and iron. Wet wood contributes a cellar softness, while metal gives a cold tang, even in warmth. You may not name each part while standing there, but your body sorts them. If something is wrong, the smell changes. Before instruments were everywhere, a worker's nose was one of the room's quiet guards. That is another reason his work could not be handed to anyone without learning. It looked like washing, and washing looks simple from a distance, but the Scaldman knew the difference between normal sourness and troubling sourness, between harmless damp and lingering residue, between a can that needed time and a can that needed repair. He knew how the room should smell when the morning was going well. We can breathe that imagined air slowly, letting the details remain gentle, never sharp. The water itself deserves attention. Zurich had long been a city shaped by water, with lake, river, fountains, and channels forming part of daily life. In the dairy, water became labor's companion. It carried heat, loosened fat, rinsed cloth, cooled fingers, and made the floor shine. Too little water, and the task failed. Too much used carelessly, and the room became wasteful, slippery, and hard to manage. The Scaldman did not command water so much as work with its habits. Hot water strikes a can differently, depending on how it is poured. A direct rush hammers the base. A slower pour slides around the walls. Steam condenses under the lid if the lid is held wrong. Drops gather at the rolled rim unless the can is angled. These things sound tiny, and they are tiny, but a day is built from them. By noticing them, we begin to understand how a worker could spend years at a task and still be guided by attention. When the Scaldman lifts a can from the trough, his whole body joins the movement. Knees bend a little, back stays guarded if he is wise. One hand steadies, the other guides. The can comes up shining and loud with falling water. For a moment, it is heavier than expected, because water clings inside and outside. Then the last sheet pours away, and the weight changes. You feel that change through the arms, and it becomes part of the rhythm, as familiar as breath. A younger worker might learn by watching first. He would see the order, copy the motions, and perhaps make the ordinary mistakes, holding a lid too long, setting a wet can where air cannot reach it, forgetting to check the inside seam, splashing too much. The older Scaldman might correct him with few words, because too many words are wasted in a room where water is speaking. A glance, a gesture, a lifted brush may be enough. Skilled labor often teaches, through the shape of movement. That teaching is also something we lost when roles dissolved into machines and broader job titles. Training became more formal in some ways, and that brought its own strengths. But the old apprenticeship of proximity, where you learned the right pressure by standing beside someone for weeks, became less central. The milk can Scaldman did not carry a manual in his apron pocket. He carried a roomful of remembered corrections, each one small enough to vanish, unless passed hand to hand. Imagine for a moment the worker before him. Perhaps in an earlier decade, before the 1920s, the same task was done with rougher arrangements. smaller dairies, and less standardized oversight. Cans were still washed, scalded, and aired because necessity teaches before policy does. Over time, the work became more regulated, more precise, more folded into public health. The Scaldman stood at a point between older hand knowledge and newer sanitary systems, with one foot in the washroom tradition and one foot in modern dairy order. This middle position makes him especially easy to lose. Jobs at the edge of change are often poorly remembered. They are too late to belong to the romantic old world, and too early to belong to the fully documented modern one. The 1920s Zurich milk can Scaldman lived in that narrow passage. He was old-fashioned in his bodily labor, modern in his sanitary purpose, and ordinary enough that almost no one thought to preserve his story as a story. The dairy cans themselves may survive in barns, markets, museums, or family storage, sometimes polished, sometimes painted, sometimes used for flowers. People like their shape. They are sturdy, rounded, and honest-looking. But an empty antique can does not tell you how it smelled after a summer route, or how loud it sounded when dropped on a wet floor, or how carefully its rim had to be scalded. The object remains. The daily procedure thins. The worker behind the procedure becomes a shadow. We can bring him back only by staying with the motions. The can is set down. The lid is removed. The smell is judged. The rinse begins. The brush turns. The scald rises. The can drains. The rack receives it. That sequence is not a list to hurry through, but a slow circle we can walk again and again. Each return softens the mind. Each detail gives the listener a place to rest. The work is repetitive because the world needed it to be. There is a kind of humility in being responsible for containers. Not the milk itself, at least not directly, not the customer, not the cow, not the price, the container, the vessel between things. Yet vessels matter. A clean vessel protects what enters it. A poor vessel betrays what it holds. The Scaldman's care is a care for in-between places, for the hollow metal space that must be ready, empty, and safe before it can be useful again. That idea may follow us beyond the dairy, though we keep our feet on the wet floor. Many quiet jobs are like that. They prepare the middle. The lock keeper holds the water between levels. The night watchman holds the hours between closing and morning. The typesetter holds the space between thought and printed page. The milk can Scaldman holds the space between one filling and the next. We can feel the kinship without leaving Zurich, because the trough is enough for tonight. The afternoon may bring inspectors sometimes, though we need not make them severe. An inspector's presence could be as ordinary as a notebook, a question, a look at the racks, a check of washing conditions. The Scaldman may straighten a little, not from fear exactly, but from the natural alertness that comes when hidden work is observed. The room smells cleaner when a stranger enters, or perhaps the worker simply notices it more. Steam curls around polished can bodies, and the whole place seems to present itself. Inspection belonged to a wider change in how cities understood food. Milk was no longer only a farm product arriving in town by trust and habit. It was a public concern, watched, tested, and managed, because urban life had grown dense and interdependent. Zurich, like other European cities, had to think about supply, freshness, disease prevention, and fairness in measure. The Scaldman did not need to carry the whole civic picture in his head. His part was enough. No residue, no careless lid, no damp hidden where clean dryness should be. When we say we lost him, we should also hear how language changed around cleanliness. Older words may speak of scalding, scrubbing, boiling, rinsing, airing. Newer systems speak of sanitation, sterilization, processing, compliance, plant hygiene. The newer words are useful, but they are less tactile. They move upward into administration and engineering. The older words keep their hands wet. The milk and Scaldman belongs to the older vocabulary, where a task is named by what the body does. Scalding is a bodily word. You feel heat when you say it. It suggests water near boiling, metal too hot to hold bare, steam touching the face. It does not hide the process behind a smooth term. The Scaldman, then, is a worker named by contact with heat, though his aim is not danger, but cleanliness. That contrast gives the job its peculiar warmth. He works with something strong enough to sting, and he uses it gently enough to protect. A modern listener may think of milk as cold from the start, sealed in cartons waiting under bright supermarket lights. The Scaldman's world sits behind that convenience like an older room behind a renovated wall. Milk once had more visible steps. It moved in cans. It was poured, measured, strained, cooled, warmed, tested, and carried. Each step left surfaces to wash and tools to tend. The loss of the Scaldman is also the loss of seeing how many surfaces touched a daily food. Yet the modern world has its own hidden workers, and perhaps that is worth noticing softly. Someone still cleans tanks. Someone still checks lines. Someone still tends wash cycles and watches gauges. The old job did not vanish into nothing, only into changed forms. But the name, the posture, the intimate row of individual cans, and the warm scalding trough as the center of a day have mostly passed away. We remember him tonight because the shape of that work is distinct, and because it asks us to slow down. At times, the Scaldman might work almost alone. At other times, the room could become crowded with returned vessels and passing bodies. The solitude was never absolute. It was the solitude of a person absorbed in a task while others move nearby. You know that feeling. A voice crosses the room, and you answer without stopping. A door opens, and you shift your elbow to make space. Someone laughs briefly over a small mishap, and the laughter fades into splashing water. Humor in such a place would be modest and practical. A lid that refuses to fit, a can that rolls where it should not, a worker whose boots squeak too loudly on the wet floor. Nothing sharp is needed. The day is already full enough. We can let those small human sounds pass through the steam, reminding us that the Scaldman was not an emblem carved from patience, but a person among people, working, noticing, tiring, and perhaps smiling at the ordinary absurdity of objects. The can racks might stand near windows for light and air. In winter the glass would cloud heavily, and someone might wipe a circle clear with the side of a hand. Through that circle, the outside world would appear softened. A wall, a roofline, a passing sleeve, a strip of pale sky. Then the steam would close it again. The washroom makes its own weather. You live inside that weather for hours, and when you step out, the actual day can feel surprisingly wide. Inside, the light catches droplets on the cans like tiny beads. They tremble, lengthen, and fall. A droplet on a curved side does not travel straight. It wanders along the metal, finds another drop, joins it, and becomes heavy enough to let go. We watch this without rushing, because drying is part of the work and part of the sleep. The can is not ready the instant it is washed. It must release its water. It must stand open to air. Air is the quietest tool in the room. It does not hang on a peg or sit in a bucket, but without it, the work remains unfinished. The Scaldman arranges cans so air can enter them. He leaves space where space is needed. He understands that heat alone is not enough if moisture is trapped. This is practical knowledge, but it also has a restful shape. Clean things need time to dry. Work needs time to settle. A day needs time to become evening. The move from cans to bottles and later to other containers altered that relationship with air. Bottle washing could be mechanized, and bottles could pass through rinses, heat, brushes, jets, and drying stages in a more continuous line. The vessels were smaller, more standardized, and easier to seal for individual households. For the customer, that meant convenience and confidence. For the Scaldman, it meant the old row of large returning cans was no longer the same center of gravity. Glass bottles brought their own workers, their own sounds, and their own risks of breakage. They clinked, rattled, and moved in crates. Their washing had a different music, brighter and more brittle than the deep knock of milk cans. A man trained on cans might find bottles fussy, or perhaps welcome their uniformity. In either case, the dairy's rhythm changed. The vessel became smaller but more numerous. The hand that once turned a large can might now guide crates or watch a line. The city's households changed too. As sealed milk became more common, the relationship between customer and dairy shifted. A jug carried to a shop, a ladle dipped into a measure, a can opened behind a counter. All these older gestures gave way to sealed delivery and standardized purchase. Cleanliness moved from visible handling to visible packaging. People trusted the cap, the label, the cold shelf, the delivery routine. The Scaldman's work became less imaginable because the container no longer returned in the same public way. It is strange how a change in packaging can erase a worker from memory. The milk still needs care, the food still depends on cleanliness, but the imagination stops at the sealed object in the hand. We forget the washing behind it because the package looks complete. The old can, by contrast, looked like a working object, meant to return, carrying scratches from the road. It openly belonged to a cycle, and the Scaldman was one of the people who kept that cycle turning. In Zurich, as in many cities, roads and vehicles mattered as much as washing rooms. Horse carts, hand carts, and early motor vehicles each shaped the timing of milk. Motor transport could bring larger quantities faster, and larger quantities encouraged larger facilities. Larger facilities justified better machinery. Better machinery reduced the need for certain hand rolls. No single invention walked in and removed the Scaldman overnight. The loss came as many small efficiencies leaned in the same direction until the old job had less room to stand. You can picture a motor lorry in the yard, its engine ticking after a route, smelling of petrol and warm metal instead of horse sweat and leather. The cans it carries may be stacked more densely, the schedule may be tighter, the dairy may expect a quicker turnaround. The Scaldman's old pace adjusts, then adjusts again. Tools change around him. Space changes. The yard grows louder in a new way. The trough still steams, but the world delivering cans to it is no longer quite the same. We do not need to make this change sad in a heavy way. It is enough to notice it. The old work made sense in its time, and the new work made sense in its time. The listener can rest between those truths. A city feeding itself will always alter its methods, and the quiet jobs that support daily life will always appear, fade, and return under different names. Tonight we hold one of those names long enough for its warmth to come back. The Scaldman's clothing may have been simple, chosen for use rather than display. Heavy boots with soles that could take water, trousers worn at the knee, a shirt rolled at the sleeves, an apron, perhaps rubberized later or thick cloth earlier, always marked by splashes. In colder months, a sweater might be kept nearby for breaks, though inside the washroom it could become too warm. Clothing in such jobs is a practical negotiation with dampness, heat, and the need to move freely. By the end of a week, the body has learned the room in layers, the right place to stand for leverage, the spot where the floor dips, the hook that catches if lifted at the wrong angle, the patch of rack that leaves marks unless wiped. You do not think of these things separately after a while. They become the map beneath your feet. When a new worker enters, you see him discover the map slowly, sometimes by mistake, sometimes by being shown. The Scaldman's wages, hours, and exact position would vary with the dairy, but the shape of modest working life remains clear enough. He was not likely a famous man. His name may have appeared in no newspaper unless life brought some unrelated event. His skill was not the kind that society framed as invention. It was the skill of daily sufficiency. Yet daily sufficiency is what most lives rest upon. We can honor that without raising our voice, simply by continuing to describe the work with care. There may have been days when the work felt endless. A delayed return might crowd the afternoon. A problem with hot water might throw off the order. A run of poorly rinsed cans from one route might make the room sour and slow. On such days, patience would feel less like calm and more like endurance. The Scaldman would still lift, scrub, scald, and drain, not because the task was meditative every hour, but because it needed doing, and because workers often carry the day by continuing. That steadiness is not dramatic. It is better than dramatic. It is the kind of steadiness that keeps milk moving through a city, keeps breakfast ordinary, keeps children from waiting, keeps kitchens supplied. We often speak of history through great events, but a city is held together by repeated small completions. A washed can, a mended strap, a swept platform, a checked ledger, a filled coal scuttle. The Zurich milk can Scaldman belong to that quiet foundation where the work is noticed mainly when it fails. Failures, when they happened, taught the room. A can left too long might smell wrong. A lid might be returned by an angry shopkeeper. A route might be delayed because the clean vessels were not ready. These were not grand disasters in our telling, only small corrections that sharpened practice. The Scaldman learns from them the way any worker learns. The next time he rinses sooner, sets aside the faulty lid, leaves more space on the rack, or insists that returned cans be brought in promptly. The social life of the dairy likely ran through these corrections too. Someone responsible for incoming routes might complain. Someone else might defend a driver caught in bad weather. A supervisor might make a note. The Scaldman standing among the actual cans would know which complaint had truth in it. Objects have a blunt honesty. A can is either sour or not. A lid either fits or does not. A seam either holds residue or comes clean. The room teaches through contact with facts. This contact with facts can be soothing in memory. In a world of complicated worries, there is rest in an object that asks for a definite action. Wash this. Rinse that. Let this dry. Put that aside. The Scaldman's work does not solve every problem, but it gives the hands a sequence. You may feel that sequence now as something almost comforting, a way of placing attention one small step ahead, without needing to carry the whole future at once. And still, the future arrives. It arrives as a new washer ordered for the plant. It arrives as a municipal rule requiring different handling. It arrives as customers asking for bottled milk, as dairies merging, as delivery routes shifting, as farm supply changing with refrigeration and transport. The Scaldman may not call it the future. He may call it the new machine, the new rule, the new room, the new way. History often enters a workplace under such plain names. The first time a machine takes over part of the scalding, the room must learn its new rhythm. There is loading to do, and unloading. There are jets to check, and temperatures to watch. There may be a satisfying force in the machine, a confidence that hot water reaches where it should. There may also be annoyance when a nozzle clogs, or a belt hesitates. The old worker's senses do not become useless. They are redirected. He listens now for the machine's wrong sound, just as he once listened to the can's wrong ring. This redirection is part of the hidden story. We lost the milk can Scaldman as a distinct figure, but not necessarily the worker himself at once. He may have become the man who tended the washer. He may have moved to receiving, repairs, bottling, or cleaning larger tanks. He may have taught younger workers the older signs of sourness and poor drying even as machinery changed the method. A job title can disappear while a person continues, carrying old knowledge into new corners. But over time, if fewer people learn the old task directly, the knowledge becomes thinner. A story remains, then a phrase, then perhaps only a joke about how things used to be. Someone says the old washroom was always steaming. Someone remembers an uncle who came home smelling of hot milk and soap. These fragments are tender because they are incomplete. We can place them near the trough tonight and let them gather into a fuller picture. The fuller picture includes fatigue, yes, but also competence. The Scaldman knows how to make the room work. He can look at a heap of returned cans and see not chaos, but order waiting to be made. He begins where beginning makes sense. He keeps the hottest work moving while setting aside what needs attention. He does not waste steps. His body has made peace with the room's distances, from trough to drain to rack to door. This is skill, even if no one gives it a ceremonial name. A can, once cleaned and dried, may be stored with others in a cool space. The air there is different, less steam, more metal, perhaps a faint draft from a door. Rows of empty cans can make a room feel expectant, as though each one is holding a place for morning. You walk among them carefully. Their sides reflect dim light. If your sleeve brushes one, it gives a low note. Empty vessels have a quiet voice, and a storage room of them can feel almost like a muted choir. Before the morning routes, those cans will be lifted again. Their clean emptiness will travel back toward farms or receiving points, ready for filling. The Scaldman may not see every departure, but his work goes with them. That is true of many quiet jobs. The worker remains behind while the result moves outward. A clean can leaves the room. A printed sheet leaves the press. A repaired shoe leaves the bench. A trimmed lampwick sends light into a street the lamplighter may not linger on. We keep returning to the idea of loss because the title asks why, but the answer is not a single reason. We lost him through better sanitation, changing containers, larger dairies, motor transport, standardized equipment, sealed distribution, and the quiet administrative habit of renaming work. We lost him because society tends to remember products more easily than maintenance. We lost him because a clean container leaves little trace. And we lost him because the old dairy washroom was built for use, not remembrance. Even the word Zurich may bring to mind banks, lake views, clocks, universities, and clean streets before it brings to mind a damp dairy yard. That is natural. Cities present their polished faces to memory, but beneath every polished city are service rooms, back lanes, loading bays, laundries, boiler rooms, and washrooms where daily life is made possible. The 1920s Zurich milk can Scaldman stands in one of those back rooms, warmed by steam, half hidden, entirely necessary. Let us hear the morning again from inside that back room. The first clatter comes before the door is fully open. Cans knock together in the yard, not harshly, but with that hollow, rounded sound that carries through damp air. A driver stamps his boots. Someone calls a greeting. Cold enters low along the floor. Then the returned vessels appear, and the work that seemed finished last evening begins again, as naturally as the city's own breathing. The repetition is not a failure of imagination. It is the nature of the job. Each day resembles the last, because milk is needed each day. That resemblance can be restful for us now, listening in the dark, because it asks nothing sudden of the mind. The same trough, the same racks, the same steam, the same careful turning of metal under the hand. Small differences appear only when we are calm enough to notice them. A new dent, a colder morning, a lid marked with fresh chalk. Chalk marks could blur in the damp, leaving pale smears on metal or fingers. Paint could chip. Stamped numbers could collect grime around their edges. The Scaldman handles these marks without sentiment, yet they guide him. A vessel must return to the right route. A mixed lid may not fit. Order begins with identification. In a city full of motion, even a milk can needs its name, and the worker near the trough helps preserve that small identity through washing, sorting, and return. The hands become reddened not only by heat, but by constant wetting and drying. Skin roughens, then softens, then roughens again. Soap removes more than dirt. Winter air cracks what water has opened. A careful worker may use fat or salve at night. Though the relief is temporary, you can feel the ache in the knuckles when the day is done, the way fingers curl more slowly around a cup. These body details belong to the job as much as the tools do. No one seeing a clean can in a morning line would know the hand that washed it. That anonymity is part of the work. It may even be part of its peace. On a good day, you do not need applause from the can. You need it to be clean. You need the route to move. You need the next vessel ready. There is a narrow satisfaction there, and narrow satisfactions can be strong. They fit inside the day without demanding a speech. The milk itself, when fresh, has a softness of smell that changes with warmth. In the can, before washing, it clings to the walls in a pale film, sometimes hardly visible unless light strikes at the right angle. That film is the Scaldman's constant companion. It is not filth in a dramatic sense. It is simply the residue of use. But residue becomes risk if ignored. The work is to respect the small thing before it becomes a larger one. This respect for the small thing is at the center of many sanitary trades. A little moisture under a lid, a little warmth in a vessel, a little residue along a seam. None of these seems like much alone, but the Scaldman works in the realm where little things accumulate. His job is a daily refusal to let accumulation take hold. He does this not with grand intensity, but with a brush, hot water, racks, and time. We can stay with that refusal because it is gentle in its own way. It says that use can be followed by care. It says that an object need not be discarded after one journey. It can be cleaned, aired, and returned. Before disposable packaging became ordinary, many systems depended on returnable things and the labor of restoring them. The Scaldman's work belongs to that older economy of circulation, where durability and washing stood beside transport and trade. Returnable systems make dirt visible. They make responsibility visible too. A can comes back bearing evidence of how it was used, and someone must face that evidence. Modern sealed packages can hide their histories more completely. They appear clean because they are new to the customer, even though their making has its own distant processes. The old milk can made the cycle more tangible. It reminded everyone who handled it that cleanliness was not a permanent state, but a renewed agreement. In the dairy washroom, this agreement was renewed through heat. Heat loosens. Heat kills what cold water may leave. Heat changes the room's mood. When the trough is fully working, steam gathers under the ceiling and softens hard edges. The Scaldman's face may shine with moisture. His eyelashes may catch tiny droplets. The air feels close but not hostile when the rhythm is right. It wraps the worker in the very condition that makes the cans safe. Sometimes, when a door opens, steam escapes in a white drift. To someone outside, it may look like the building sighing. Inside, you barely notice after a while, except for the coolness that follows. That coolness can be welcome. It crosses the wet floor, touches the ankles, and reminds you of the weather beyond the walls. Then the door closes, the room gathers itself again, and the work continues with the same low sounds: brush, water, metal, breath. The Scaldman may have had a favorite hour, perhaps early, before voices multiplied, perhaps mid-morning, when the hardest rush was organized, perhaps evening, when rows of clean cans stood behind him and the room began to empty. Workers often form attachments to small portions of the day. They may not speak of them, but the body knows when the light is easiest, when the sounds are kindest, when the task feels most nearly balanced between effort and completion. If he had a least favored hour, it might be the one when heat, fatigue, and unfinished work all stood together. The cans still waiting, the apron heavy, the water needing attention, the floor slick, the air thick. Even then, the solution is not dramatic. It is the next can, then the next. You reduce the heap by honoring one object at a time. This is a useful sleep thought too, though we let it remain inside the scene. One vessel, one motion, one breath. The old dairy's architecture may have been plain, built for cleaning rather than charm. Walls that could be scrubbed, floors sloped to drains, windows placed for air, doors wide enough for carts, cans, crates, and men carrying weight. The beauty is in adaptation. Every surface has a reason. Every reason comes from use. When we imagine the Zurich washroom, we should let it be practical, not picturesque. Practical rooms often become beautiful only after we understand what they are doing. The Scaldman station would likely be near the flow of returns, because dirty cans should not cross paths carelessly with clean ones. Even before modern layout diagrams, workers understood that movement mattered. Dirty in one direction, clean in another. Lids kept under control, drains kept clear. You can see the room as a kind of quiet choreography, with the Scaldman at the turn, changing the vessel from one state to another, then sending it onward. Choreography may sound too graceful for wet boots and heavy cans, but the word fits if we keep it humble. A good work rhythm prevents collision. It keeps hands from crossing awkwardly. It lets one worker pass while another lifts. It makes space at the rack before the next hot can arrives. You feel this choreography most when it breaks. A misplaced crate interrupts a path. A crowded rack slows the drain. A late delivery makes every movement tighter. Modern industrial design would eventually formalize much of this. Flow lines, separated zones, washable surfaces, time cycles, and mechanical handling all carried forward lessons that handworkers knew in bodily form. The Scaldman's room was not outside the history of technology. It was one of the places technology learned what needed solving. Heavy lifting, inconsistent heat, slow drying, hidden residue, and dependence on tired hands all pointed toward new equipment. The old job contained the reasons for its own transformation. That thought is gentle, but it has depth. A worker's skill can reveal the very places where tools will later assist or replace him. The Scaldman knew where cans were hard to clean. Designers sought smoother interiors. He knew hot water must reach every surface. Machines used jets and controlled cycles. He knew drying mattered. Plants improved airflow and storage. In that way, His daily difficulties became part of progress, even if his name did not travel with the improvements. We can let him remain unnamed, because most workers in history are unnamed, and anonymity is not absence. Tonight, the role is enough. The milk can Scaldman stands for many specific men whose records may be thin, whose aprons were washed, worn out, and replaced, whose hands did the same essential motions across countless mornings. When we say Zurich, we give the work a city. When we say 1920s, we give it a moment. When we say Scaldman, we give it a body at the trough. The body at the trough hears bells beyond the dairy, church bells, tram bells, shop bells, perhaps all in one day. Bells divide time for the city, but inside the washroom the division is also measured by cans completed. A bell may ring, and you may not look up if the brush is in motion. The can before you is nearer than the hour, yet the bell enters the room and leaves a faint mark, telling you that others are moving through their own routines at the same time. That shared routine is part of the calm. The Scaldman is not alone in repetition. Across Zurich, people are sweeping steps, weighing flour, sorting mail, tending presses, polishing counters, checking watches, stoking boilers, and opening ledgers. Each task has its own temperature and sound. His has steam and metal. Another has paper and ink. Another has wool and chalk. The city is a collection of rhythms, and milk passes through many of them before the day is done. Milk shops themselves were places of regular exchange. Customers might arrive with containers or receive measured milk according to local practice and era. There would be counters, ladles, cool surfaces, and the need to keep things clean in public view. Behind that visible cleanliness was the less visible washing of cans. The Scaldman's room supported the shop's confidence. A bright counter means less if the vessel behind it is neglected. Cleanliness must hold through the whole chain, including the parts no customer sees. The Scaldman may sometimes smell the difference between milk routes. This is not mystical, only practical. Feed, temperature, timing, and handling all leave hints. A can from a quick, cool route is different from one delayed in heat. A vessel returned promptly is different from one forgotten in a corner. You learn these differences through repetition, as a laundress learns fabrics or a printer learns paper by touch. The material tells you its history if you have spent enough hours listening with your hands. Listening with the hands is a useful phrase for this job. The hands hear dents, heat, slickness, looseness, and residue. They notice when the brush slides too easily because soap remains, or drags because milk film has not lifted. They feel when a lid edge is bent. They feel when a handle's hinge is rough. The ears and nose help, but the hands are closest. A worker who listens with his hands becomes difficult to replace until the whole system changes around him. When replacement comes through system change, it can seem impersonal because it is. No one needs to dislike the Scaldman for his role to fade. The dairy owner sees efficiency. The health authority sees safety. Customers see sealed milk. Engineers see better machines. Younger workers see a different path. The old station remains useful for a while, then less so. One day, the job is no longer a job with its own name. This is how many forms of labor pass, without cruelty, yet with real loss. The loss is not only nostalgia. A vanished job takes with it certain daily perceptions. Fewer people know the smell of scalded milk residue. Fewer know the ring of a clean can. Fewer know how steam clouds a window before dawn in a dairy yard. Such knowledge may not be needed in the same way, but it was once part of the human understanding of food. Remembering it widens the room of history. It lets ordinary maintenance stand beside invention and trade. We can return now to a single can, because single things keep us grounded. It sits near the drain, waiting after a route. Its sides are cool. The lid has a crescent of cream along the underside. The handle is damp from the yard. You lift it and feel the familiar pull in your forearm. The first rinse goes in, hollow and echoing. You tilt the can, and the water rolls around the base, carrying away a pale swirl. The day begins again in that sound. The brush follows. Its handle fits into the worn part of the palm. You guide it along the interior wall, slow enough to feel resistance, firm enough to clear the film. The bristles make a rough circular whisper. Steam from the trough warms your cheek before the can even reaches it. Around you, other cans wait with patient dullness. We are not in a hurry. The work has been done before, and it will be done again, and tonight that sameness is exactly where the mind can rest. The scald is the turning point. The can lowers into heat, and for a moment the smell rises more strongly, then fades. Hot water brightens the metal and softens what remains. You rotate the vessel so no side is neglected. Tiny bubbles cling along a seam, then break away. Your fingers adjust their grip on the hook. The sound is close and enveloping. Water against metal, steam against air, a room making clean emptiness through heat. When the can comes out, it has changed states. Dirty to washed. Used to ready. Damp with old milk to shining with new heat. You set it inverted. And the water falls in lines. It strikes the rack, then the floor, then the drain. Each drop joins the others, and the room receives them all without comment. This is the work's quiet generosity. It accepts repetition, it accepts residue, it accepts the need to begin again, because beginning again is the nature of useful things. The Zurich milk can Scaldman may not have thought of himself as part of a vanishing trade. Most people do not live inside the historical meaning of their own work. They live inside the next hour, the next wage, the next errand, the next meal. If he noticed change, he noticed it in practical terms first. Fewer cans this week, more bottles in the crate room, new equipment by the wall. A younger supervisor speaking of efficiency, a route altered, a room rearranged. A rearranged room can be unsettling in a small way. Tools no longer fall where the hand expects them. The path from trough to rack changes. A machine takes the space where spare cans once stood. Even improvement requires the body to relearn. The Scaldman may grumble, then adjust, because workers are often more adaptable than outsiders imagine. But something is lost when the old map under the feet no longer matches the room. The day asks for attention in places that used to be automatic. Still, there may also be relief. A machine that handles the heaviest washing can spare the back. Better drainage can make the floor safer. Improved heat control can reduce uncertainty. More standardized cans can mean fewer stubborn seams. We should allow the worker that relief. Remembering a lost job does not require wishing every hardship back. It asks only that we recognize the labor that carried people until better arrangements arrived, and that we notice the human shape of what was replaced. The human shape includes the sound of someone clearing his throat in steam. It includes the habit of wiping hands on an apron already wet. It includes the glance toward the door when a late delivery arrives. It includes the way a worker stands slightly differently at day's end, shoulders rounded, head lowered, not defeated, only used. These details are small enough to fit in the palm, and perhaps that is why they help us sleep. They do not demand. They accompany. At the edge of the washroom, a small shelf might hold practical odds and ends. A pencil, a stub of chalk, a tin for nails or washers, a folded note, perhaps a cup left where steam cannot drip into it. Such shelves become biographies without intending to. They show what the worker needed often enough to keep nearby. The Scaldman's shelf would not be decorative. It would be a map of interruptions, repairs, marks, reminders, and brief pauses in a wet day. The chalk returns in our mind because it is soft against metal, temporary and easily blurred. It marks what must be remembered only until the next step. Much of the Scaldman's world is like that. Marks that guide, then vanish. Steam that appears, then clears. Water that does its work, then drains away. Cleanliness that must be made again tomorrow. The job itself became one of those temporary marks on history, blurred by newer systems, but not entirely gone if we look closely. We look closely now at the rack. It is strong but worn. Its crosspieces bear the repeated pressure of metal rims. Some places are darker from damp. Some edges have been smoothed by years of contact. If made of wood, it has swollen and dried many times. If made of metal, it has dulled where cans rest. The rack is a partner in the work, holding each vessel upside down with simple patience. Without it, washing would be unfinished confusion. The Scaldman trusts the rack the way a cook trusts a table or a printer trusts a frame. A good surface lets the mind move on. A bad one interrupts every motion. When the rack is full, he must plan. Which cans are dry enough to move, which need more air, where the next hot vessel can go. This planning is continuous and quiet. He may do it while speaking to someone, while listening to the boiler, while noticing that the trough needs more heat. Heat management is one of the subtle parts of the job. A full morning of scalding draws energy steadily. If the water cools, washing loses force. If it is too hot for the available handling, work becomes awkward and wasteful. The scaldman must cooperate with whoever tends the boiler or heat source, unless he does it himself in a smaller operation. He learns the delay between adjustment and result. Turn a valve now, feel the change later. That delay teaches patience. Delayed results are common in old industrial processes. A stoker feeds a fire before steam is needed. A dyer waits for color to take. A baker warms an oven ahead of dough. A scaldman brings water to readiness before the worst of the returns. Work becomes a conversation with time. You cannot ask the room to answer instantly. You prepare, watch, adjust, and trust the slow response. For a sleep listener, this pacing is kind. Nothing leaps. Everything arrives through gradual change. The gradual change of the scaldman's disappearance may have taken years in any given dairy. Perhaps he first shared the work with a washer. Then the washer handled more. Then milk cans themselves became fewer. Then the room changed function. The man who once scalded cans might still pass the place where the trough had been and remember the old steam. Or perhaps he left before the final alteration and someone else saw the last rack removed. History rarely gives every worker a clear final day. A clear final day might be easier to tell, but the unclear ending is truer to the quiet jobs we are following. They dissolve into schedules, purchases, retirements, renovations, and renamed duties. The lamp is replaced, the route is changed, the machine is installed, the worker is transferred, the ledger uses a new category. Then, years later, the old name sounds strange. Milk can scaldman. A person asks what that means, and the answer has to begin with steam. So we begin with steam again, because steam is the soft doorway into the work. It lifts from the trough, gathers under the ceiling, dampens the hair, beads on glass, and carries heat into the bones of the room. It hides the far wall slightly, so the dairy seems larger and smaller at once. You can see your hands clearly, but the window is a blur. The world narrows to what must be touched. For sleep, this narrowing is gentle. It releases the far horizon. Within that narrowed world, the scaldman's motions remain broad and rounded. Lift, turn, pour, brush, lower, raise, drain, set down. The words themselves have weight, but the work between them is smoother than separate commands. A practiced worker does not stop between every verb. The movement flows, one action preparing the next. The can is angled for draining before the water has fully left it. The rack space is chosen before the can leaves the trough. Skill makes continuity. Continuity is also what the old milk system required. Farms, dairies, carriers, shops, and households formed a continuous loop, and the scaldman station kept one part of that loop from souring. If his work fell behind, the loop tightened and complained. If his work ran well, no one thought about it. This is the quiet paradox of support labor. Its success erases its visibility. The better the scaldman worked, the easier it was for others to forget he was there. Tonight, we do not forget. We let the invisible become audible again. We hear the hollow ring of a can set upright. We hear hot water slosh and settle. We hear a brush knock once against a rim. We hear breath in a warm room. We hear a tram in the distance, thin through the wall. We hear the small scrape of a boot finding purchase on wet stone. Each sound places us more firmly beside the trough. The light of the washroom may be electric by the 1920s, though perhaps not bright in the way modern workrooms are bright. A bulb can glow through steam with a halo. Shadows soften under it. Metal catches small highlights and loses them as you turn. Earlier habits remain even under newer light. A worker still trusts daylight when it comes. He still moves closer to a window to inspect a stubborn interior. Technology layers itself over old gestures rather than replacing them all at once. Electric light may have lengthened usable hours or made early work easier, but it also revealed things. Residue at the rim, dirt near the base, a wet patch on the floor. Cleanliness improves when people can see better, just as it improves when they can heat and drain better. The Scaldman's work sits among these improvements, using whatever helps. We should not imagine him as opposed to modernity. He is one of the people modernity passes through. The passing through can be felt in materials. Older tinned or galvanized surfaces, later smoother metals, different alloys, better fittings, improved rubber parts, clearer markings. Each improvement reduces a little trouble. Each little trouble removed changes the work. A smoother interior needs less brushing. A better lid traps less residue. A standardized size fits a rack more reliably. At first, these are conveniences. Over years, conveniences accumulate into a different job, and the old title loosens from the worker's shoulders. Even the body motions shift when containers change. A large can requires a strong lift and a wide turn. A smaller bottle requires quicker handling and more repetition. A pipeline requires opening, flushing, inspecting, and trusting in visible interiors. Each vessel teaches the body a different grammar. The Scaldman was fluent in the grammar of the can, its weight, mouth, shoulder, seam, lid, and handle. When the can receded, that fluency had fewer places to speak. There is something touching about fluency becoming obsolete. A person can know exactly how to do a thing the world no longer asks for. Yet that knowledge is not wasted in a human sense. It shaped his discipline, his eye, his patience, and perhaps the way he did later work. Skills leave traces in people. The hand that once inspected can rims may later inspect machine parts carefully. The nose trained on sourness may still notice when a room is not right. Old labor continues quietly inside new labor. As we remain with him, the room becomes less like an exhibit and more like a place where time can pass naturally. Morning returns, afternoon settles, evening cools. The same walls receive steam and release it. The same floor darkens and dries. The same racks fill and empty. We begin to understand that a job is not only a set of tasks, but an arrangement of time, space, material, and attention. Remove any one of those, and the job changes into something else. The milk can Scaldman's arrangement depended on reusable metal cans, moving visibly through the dairy. When that visibility diminished, his role diminished. When washing became enclosed, his posture changed. When containers changed, his tools changed. When regulations and machinery absorbed judgment into procedures, his personal discretion narrowed. These are not complaints. They are the mechanics of disappearance. A job is lost when the conditions that made its specific rhythm necessary no longer gather in the same room. Still, for this hour, they gather. The can is heavy. The trough is hot. Zurich is outside, cool and ordered, waking into the late 1920s with trams, ledgers, market baskets, and chimney smoke. We are inside, where milk's daily journey has returned as emptiness, and emptiness must be cleaned before it can be trusted. The Scaldman's arms are ready, not because the work is grand, but because the work is his, and because the first can is waiting near the drain. He lifts it with practiced economy, and the day opens once more through metal, water, and steam. The first can answers with that low, rounded sound that tells you it has been used recently, emptied properly, and left with just enough residue to make the morning real. You tip it toward the drain, and a thin wash of pale liquid slides out, catching the weak light before it disappears under the iron grate. The handle is cold through the cloth, but the chill will not last. Already the trough is breathing beside you, and the Zurich milk can Scaldman begins again where yesterday ended, at the quiet border between use and readiness. There is a small pause before the rinse, not long enough to call hesitation, only the worker's habit of looking once inside before water changes the evidence. You see the dull sheen along the wall, the faint crescent near the base, and a darker place where the can must have leaned during transport. A careless eye might miss it. Your eye does not. The brush waits in its bucket, bristles spread from use, and the room holds the soft expectation of a task that knows its order. Water enters with a hollow, swelling note, and the sound fills the can as if the vessel has become a little room of its own. You turn it slowly, letting the first rinse touch every side. The water comes out clouded, not dirty in a dramatic way, but carrying the tender remains of milk's journey. It smells sweet for a moment, then faintly sour as it meets the drain. This is where the Scaldman's day begins to warm, with the first clear decision made by hand. The brush follows the path the eye has chosen, down the wall, around the base, back under the rolled lip, then over the place where the handle rivets leave their little interruptions. The wood of the brush handle has a dark smoothness where many mornings have polished it. You feel the pressure through the wrist, and you feel the metal respond. At first the bristles drag, then glide, and the glide tells you more than sight can tell, because the hand knows when a surface has let go. Outside, the milk route is still unsettled in the yard. A driver shifts cans with a muffled clank, and someone calls across the damp air, not loudly, just enough to be heard over the early work. The city beyond the gate is gathering itself. One shutter, one tram, one kitchen fire at a time. We remain inside with the 1920s Zurich milk can Scaldman, where the morning is not measured by headlines or speeches, but by the number of vessels waiting to be returned to use. The can is ready for heat now. You lower it into the scalding water, and the room gives back a fuller breath. Steam lifts at the face. The metal darkens with wetness, then brightens as water runs from the curve. You hold it at an angle so the heat can enter where the brush has passed. The scald is not a punishment for dirt. It is a final assurance, a warm and thorough finishing, the part of the work that turns washing into trust. There is a certain steadiness in holding a vessel in hot water and not asking it to become clean faster than it can. The Scaldman knows this without making a philosophy of it. He gives the heat time to work. He turns the can so the rim is not neglected. He tips it and lets water reach the shoulder. If bubbles cling, he shifts the angle. The action is plain, but it contains judgment. And judgment repeated daily becomes a quiet kind of craft. When the can rises from the trough, a veil of steam follows it, and drops fall in quick shining lines from the rim. You carry it to the rack, careful of your boots on the damp floor, and set it upside down among the others. The first can of the day rests open to air. It will need time before it is truly ready, because washing is not finished until drying has had its turn. We leave it there, shining softly, and reach for the next. The second can has a bent lid that does not want to release. You steady the body with your knee and work the lid loose without forcing it too sharply. It comes away with a little sigh of suction, and the smell inside is warmer than the first. Perhaps it waited too long in the yard. Perhaps the root came from farther out. You do not need to know the full story. The can has told you enough, and your hands answer with a longer rinse, a firmer brushing, and a little more time in the scald. This is how the work prevents trouble before trouble has a name, not through alarm, but through small adjustments. More water here, more brushing there. Set this lid aside. Open that window a hand's width. Ask whether the late cans should be brought in sooner. The Zurich milk can Scaldman stands in the middle of many such decisions, each too small to be remembered by anyone else, yet each keeping the dairy's day from drifting into disorder. In the 1920s, the scientific understanding behind these habits was becoming more formal in public life. People spoke more confidently about bacteria, heat treatment, and sanitary handling, and city dairies increasingly organized their rooms around these ideas. Yet the worker at the trough still met cleanliness as a physical matter. He did not handle a word like bacteria with his fingers. He handled a seam, a rim, a lid groove, a film of milk that had to be loosened before the can could be sent back. There is a difference between knowing a principle and living beside it all day. A notice can say that vessels must be scalded. A supervisor can repeat the rule, but the Scaldman feels the rule in the weight of a hot can and the tenderness of skin after many hours. He knows that sanitary order is not abstract. It is wet sleeves, clear drains, enough heat, enough air, and enough attention when attention is easiest to lose. We can rest in that grounded knowledge, because it has no sharp edge. The line of cans grows shorter very slowly. At the start of the morning, progress can seem almost invisible, because each vessel takes its share of time and the returned stack looks stubbornly large. You learn not to measure too often. You let the hand find the next handle. You let the brush travel its circle. You let the scald rise and fall. Only after many repetitions do you look back and see a row of inverted cans shining behind you like proof that the day is moving. A dairy washroom is full of reflections that are never quite clear. Light bends on wet metal, steam clouds glass, water trembles in the trough, the floor catches pale shapes and breaks them underfoot. Nothing reflects like a mirror, and perhaps that is why the room feels so gentle in memory. Edges are softened by use. Even hard objects seem to belong to a slower world, where the shine of a can is always touched by water and work. The Scaldman's breathing follows the task. A deeper breath before lifting, a shorter breath while turning the vessel, a release as the can settles onto the rack. He may not notice this, but we can, because we are moving slowly beside him. Work teaches the body to breathe around effort. The breath does not hurry ahead. It waits for the lift, accepts the weight, and loosens when the weight leaves the hands. In that rhythm, the room becomes almost like a long, low song. The morning's human details arrive in small ways. Someone has wrapped a sandwich in paper and tucked it near the window where it will stay cool. A driver leaves a joke unfinished because he is called back to the yard. A younger worker has splashed his apron badly and tries to hide his annoyance. The scald man glances up, perhaps with the mild expression of someone who has seen every kind of splash. Then he returns to the can, because the can is where the day is asking him to be. The work asks for modest discipline. You do not skip the lid because the can looks clean. You do not trust the outside shine. You do not stack wet vessels too close because the rack is crowded. The habits are plain, but they protect the whole chain. A job like this can make a person skeptical of appearances in a quiet way. A bright surface means little until the hidden edges have been checked. The scald man learns to trust what has been properly done, not what merely looks finished. Perhaps this is part of why the role faded so easily into broader sanitation work. Once the rules became stronger and machines carried more of the hidden checking, people no longer needed a single specialist identified by the scalding trough. They needed a managed process. They needed equipment that could be inspected. They needed records that could be shown. The scaldman's personal habit of care was gradually translated into procedures, and a procedure can preserve a value while erasing the old human outline of it. The erasure was quiet because the value remained. No one wanted dirtier cans. No one wanted careless milk. The purpose survived, but the posture changed. Instead of a man leaning over steam with a hook and brush, there might be a worker watching a washer's cycle or checking a gauge. Instead of rows of large cans drying like bells, there might be crates of bottles, stainless tanks, or enclosed lines. The work became cleaner in one sense, less visible in another, and the old name lost its place to stand. We return to the rack, where the first cans have begun to cool. You touch one lightly near the base, and feel warmth fading through metal. Its mouth is dry around the edge, but a few drops cling inside. It stays where it is. The next rack space must be chosen carefully. You move a can that has finished draining and place its lid nearby. The sorting feels slow, but it prevents confusion later, and later has a way of punishing whatever morning neglects. The lids may be marked or matched in a system that everyone in the room understands without needing to explain it each time. Some lids fit only certain cans after years of dents and wear. A new lid may sit too brightly among old ones. A battered lid may still serve if it closes well. You learn not to judge by appearance alone. A lid with scratches can be honest. A clean-looking lid can hide a stubborn ring beneath its edge. Again, the hand must know. The sound of lids in hot water is lighter than the sound of cans. They tap, flutter, and sometimes spin slightly before settling. You catch one with the hook, turn it, and watch water sheet across its underside. The steam carries the smell of warm metal and faint milk fat, quickly thinning. A lid is small, but many small pieces can slow a day if they are neglected. The scaldman treats them as part of the same quiet promise, because a vessel is only as clean as everything that closes it. By now, the washroom has fully warmed. The early chill has retreated into corners and under the door. Your sleeves are damp at the cuffs, though you rolled them high. A bead of water runs down from your temple and disappears near the collar. The heat is not a summer heat exactly, even if the season is warm. It is a made heat, produced by boiler, trough, labor, and enclosed walls. It carries the smell of work rather than weather. That made heat is one of the old industrial comforts, even when it is tiring. People who worked near boilers, ovens, vats, presses, and kilns knew rooms that had their own climate. The Scaldman's climate was moist and metallic, shaped by milk and steam. He entered it in the morning and let it close around him. At the end of the day, stepping outside could feel like leaving one season for another. We can sense that threshold even now, though we remain inside. The city may send in new sounds as the hour advances. A delivery boy whistling once before he remembers where he is. A cart brake scraping. The distant clatter of hooves becoming less common in some streets, and still familiar in others. Motor engines, when they pass, bring a different rhythm, a lower vibration that belongs to the century's new habits. The milk can Scaldman works while those sounds overlap, old transport and new transport both carrying daily life toward the dairy door. Transport changed the timing of milk, and timing changed washing. Faster routes could mean more concentrated returns. Larger vehicles could bring in more vessels at once. Central collection could shift when cans arrived and how many workers were needed at certain hours. The Scaldman did not study this from a distance. He felt it as a crowded floor, a shorter pause, a new peak in the morning, or a change in where the stacks appeared. Large changes often arrive first as rearranged chores. Sometimes the returned cans might be warmer on one side than another, depending on sun, cart placement, or time waiting. You feel these differences with the palm and forearm. A can from the shade has a different touch. A can from a long summer round carries its own urgency. The Scaldman learns to respond before the smell grows too strong. The task is not only cleaning what is there, it is preventing what would happen if warmth and milk residue were given too much time together. In the room's corner, the drain continues its patient work. Water travels there in thin sheets, carrying soap, milk traces, and the gray dust of use. A good drain is almost invisible when it functions well. A poor drain announces itself with standing water and sourness. The Scaldman knows the drain as he knows the rack. He clears what must be cleared, because the floor is part of the sanitary system, not merely the place where feet happen to stand. The floor tells stories too. Scratches from dragged cans, darker lines where water often runs, a worn patch by the trough, perhaps a shallow chip where a heavy vessel fell years earlier and left its mark. You learn to step around certain places. You learn when not to turn too quickly. The floor is not passive. It is an old co-worker, sometimes helpful, sometimes slippery, always present beneath the day's work. In memory, it shines with the dull brightness of repeated washing. A person hearing this half asleep might picture the floor first, because floors hold routine so honestly. Boots move, water falls, light shifts, work repeats. The Scaldman's view is often downward and close, not lifted towards some grand horizon. He sees rims, drains, bristles, knees, handles, and the base rings of cans. His world is humble in angle, yet when we lower our attention to that level, we discover how much history lives near the ground. The history of milk in cities is partly the history of trust near the ground. Cans set on carts, carried through alleys, placed on platforms, lifted into washrooms, rinsed over drains. Milk had to cross mud, dust, hands, heat, and time, and each crossing required care. The Scaldman station was one of the places where the roughness of the journey was answered. He could not control every mile, but he could return the vessel to order before it traveled again. As municipal systems improved, trust moved upward into institutions. Inspections, dairies, laboratories, labels, and rules became the new guardians of confidence. This was not a simple replacement of trust with machinery. It was trust reorganized. The customer no longer had to know the worker or the route in the same way. The seal, the brand, the city's oversight, and the cold chain carried more meaning. The Scaldman's trust was tactile and local. The newer trust was distributed and documented. Distributed trust can feed a city well, but it can make individual hands harder to see. That is one reason tonight's work feels like a recovered corner. We are not trying to turn back the city's improvements. We are turning toward the worker whose care was folded into them. The Zurich milk can Scaldman becomes visible again when we notice the practical problems his role solved. Residue, heat, drying, sorting, timing, damage, and the steady return of vessels into the milk chain. The morning moves into the hour when hands no longer feel clumsy. At first, cold and sleep might make the grip slower. Now the muscles have warmed. You lift with less thought. You know where to place your feet. The brush finds its circle. The hook catches the can lip cleanly. This hour can be satisfying, because effort and habit align. The body is awake, but not yet exhausted, and the room's demands seem matched to what you can give. A worker may feel, in such an hour, a quiet privacy even among others. The task fills enough of the mind to soften worries, but not so much that it sharpens them. The splash, the steam, the handle, the rack, all of it creates a narrow path. You travel that path with him. We do not need to know his personal history to feel the shape of the hour. It is enough to stand near the trough and let the repeated motions carry us forward. Some cans may have labels or supplier marks that hint at farms beyond the city. These marks connect the washroom to hills, barns, courtyards, and morning milking stools. A Scaldman who never visits those places still handles their evidence. Bits of straw, mud color, and can condition tell him which routes have been hard on the equipment. Perhaps he knows certain suppliers by their cans alone. The city's back room and the countryside's early labor meet in his hands. That meeting is part of what made the milk can such a central object. It was rural and urban at once, filled in farm air, emptied in city systems, washed in dairy steam, returned by route. Its metal body crossed worlds that many people kept mentally separate. The Scaldman stood at the urban end of that crossing, receiving what came back and making it fit for another journey outward. When the can declined, that visible rural-urban loop became less obvious to the ordinary customer. Bottles, sealed and labeled, told a different story. They emphasized the dairy brand, the measured portion, the household convenience. The farm behind the milk became less visible, and the returning industrial container became less personal. Later packaging would move even farther from the old loop, becoming lighter, disposable, and more distant from the worker who cleaned it. The Scaldman belonged to an age when the container was sturdy enough to remember its route, and valuable enough to be restored. Restoration has a slower moral feeling than disposal. You do not throw away the can because it is used. You expect use. You wash it because use is normal, because things that serve daily life are meant to come back marked by service. The Scaldman's job grew from that expectation. His work says, without words, that an object can carry labor many times if someone tends the interval between uses. That interval, wet and steamy and plain, is where we are resting tonight. Around midday, the room's pace may loosen. The largest return has been dealt with, and the remaining work spreads out. You might hear more conversation now, because the water is less dominant and the urgency has softened. Someone mentions rain over the lake. Someone asks whether the afternoon route is changed. Someone wipes fog from a window and looks out without really seeing much. The Scaldman may answer briefly, or he may simply listen while turning a lid in his hands. Listening is a common part of repetitive work. You hear other people's days pass near yours. You hear complaints, weather reports, fragments of family news, jokes told in low voices, instructions repeated, and footsteps that become recognizable. The washroom is not silent isolation. It is a place where speech appears in pockets, then disappears beneath the next task. We can let those voices remain indistinct, because their softness matters more than their words. The food at midday carries the outside world into the worker's body. Bread, cheese, sausage, fruit, coffee, perhaps soup if there is a place for it. The taste of lunch breaks the taste of steam. You sit or stand where the air is cooler, and the first bite feels grounding. After hours of washing containers that held food for others, the worker becomes simply a person eating. That reversal is small, but tender. Hands that have cleaned vessels now hold bread. A lunch break in a working day is not pure leisure. It is bracketed by what came before and what waits after. The scaldman may glance toward the washroom door even while chewing. The body rests, but the day remains present. There is a comfort in that too, if the workload is manageable. Work gives shape to the pause, and the pause gives strength back to the work. You feel the bench under you, the cup in your hand, the coolness of air on skin that has been warm too long. After lunch, the room smells different when you re-enter. This may be because the nose has rested, or because the morning residue has mostly been cleared. The sharper, sour edge is gone. Steam remains, but it is thinner. Clean metal and wet floor dominate. The scaldman can sense the day's progress in that changed smell. A room at the start of washing and a room after the first great wave are not the same place, though the walls have not moved. The afternoon may include maintenance that morning could not spare time for. Brushes are checked. Racks are shifted. A blocked place in the drain is cleared. A troublesome can is examined in better light. You turn it slowly and look at the seam, seeing where residue hides. Perhaps it will be sent for repair, or perhaps it can serve a little longer with care. Such judgments belong to people who handle objects repeatedly. They know the difference between worn and unfit. Worn things have dignity in a workplace. They show service. A can with scratches, a brush with a darkened handle, a rack polished at the edges, a hook rubbed bright where fingers hold it. None of these is shabby if it still works. The scaldman lives among worn things, and he adds to their wear by using them properly. Modern factories often hide wear behind replaceable parts and smooth surfaces, but older rooms display it openly. Wear becomes a record of touch. The record of touch is also a record of time. Every morning adds a little polish to the handle, a little dullness to the rack, a little stain to the apron. No single day makes the change visible. Then, after years, the object has the look of long service. The scaldman himself changes in the same gradual way. Hands thicken. Shoulders learn the lift. Hearing becomes tuned to certain sounds. Memory stores roots, marks, and the feel of cans now long replaced. When we ask why we lost him, we are also asking why certain records of touch are no longer made. Machines still wear, but differently. Stainless equipment may be cleaned with chemicals and cycles, not by one pair of hands circling the same metal each morning. Disposable containers do not gather the same history. A carton does not return dented from a root, asking to be restored. The old can's accumulated life required a worker who understood accumulated wear. There is nothing wrong with smoothness, but smoothness changes memory. A sealed carton offers safety and convenience, yet it tells little about the path it took. A milk can, by contrast, could be read almost like a work diary if you knew its marks. The scaldman was one of its readers. He read without sentiment, because reading was part of doing. Tonight, we read with him more slowly, letting the dents and rims become a way of seeing a vanished system. In the afternoon light, a clean can's interior looks deeper than it is. The curved sides draw the eye downward to a small pale reflection at the base. You tilt it slightly and watch the reflection move. If any cloudiness remains, the can goes back. If it is clear, it can rest. This visual check is quiet, but exact. The scaldman does not need to speak. The can either answers yes or asks for more work. The word more is a common word in manual jobs. More rinsing, more heat, more drying, more room on the rack, more time. It is not a dramatic demand. It is simply the material telling the worker what is unfinished. The scaldman's patience comes from accepting that unfinished things must be brought to completion in their own way. He cannot argue a can clean. He cannot explain residue away. He must give it the contact it requires. A supervisor might see only speed, but a good supervisor would understand that speed without completion is false economy. A can washed too quickly returns as a complaint, a smell, a risk, or a delay. The scaldman knows this deeply because he stands where consequences first become visible. He may work steadily, even briskly, but he does not confuse haste with skill. Skill is the quiet removal of wasted motion while preserving the care that the object needs. This difference between haste and skill helps explain why machines eventually appealed so strongly. A well-designed washer could be fast without being careless, at least when maintained properly. It could repeat heat, spray, and timing more evenly than tired arms. It could handle growing volume. For a city, that mattered. For the old Scaldman, it meant that the kind of skill he embodied was no longer the only way to solve the problem, and eventually no longer the favored way. Yet machines introduced their own needs. Jets must be unclogged, temperatures must be checked, moving parts must be cleaned, detergents must be measured, drainage must still work. A machine can hide failure until someone attentive notices. So the old sensory habits did not vanish entirely. They changed address. The worker might now smell when a cycle has not rinsed properly, hear when a pump sounds wrong, or see when drying is incomplete. The Scaldman's descendants, in work if not in title, still listen. The title itself may have been local, informal, or translated through the way people described his task. That makes it even more fragile. Official records often prefer broader categories: dairy laborer, washer, plant hand, sanitation worker. The specific warmth of Scaldman disappears when language generalizes, but working people often carry more precise names among themselves, names based on station, tool, or motion. The man at the scalding trough becomes the Scaldman because that is where you find him. Place-based names have a homely truth: the pressman by the press, the lock-keeper by the lock, the lamplighter under the lamp, the milk can Scaldman at the trough. These names attach a person to a task so plainly that you can picture the work without explanation. When the place disappears, the name loses its anchor. Remove the trough and Scaldman begins to sound like a riddle. Restore the trough in imagination, and the meaning returns at once. The trough, then, deserves another look. It is not a delicate object. It is built to hold heat, water, and daily use. Its edges may be rounded from years of contact. The metal may be dull where minerals have left pale traces. A pipe feeds it, a drain empties it, and steam rises from it in slow folds. You stand close enough to feel warmth on your thighs. The sound inside is never still, even when no can is moving. Heat makes water speak softly. The Scaldman tends this trough as both tool and environment. If the level drops, the work changes. If the water clouds too heavily, it must be refreshed. If the heat weakens, the scald loses certainty. You cannot treat the trough as background. It is the heart of the station. The cans come to it one by one, and it returns them altered. In a larger symbolic story, it is almost a crossing place, but in the room itself, it is simply where the hot work happens. Practical people often dislike grand metaphors while they are working, and rightly so. A trough is a trough. A can is a can. A floor is a floor. But when the day is far behind us, and we are using history as a calm lamp, those plain things can carry gentle meaning without losing their plainness. The trough remains metal and water. The can remains a vessel. The floor remains wet. The meaning rests on top lightly, like steam on a window. We can imagine the Scaldman's homeward route again, but this time from the middle of the week, when fatigue has accumulated and payday is not yet close. The street feels cooler after the washroom. Shops are brighter than the dairy, their windows offering goods with a polished stillness. He passes them without much lingering. His arms know the day. The smell of soap may rise from his sleeves when he moves. A passerby would not know his exact work, only that he is a laboring man going home. At home, if he has a family, the work may appear only in small accommodations. Wet boots set aside, hands washed again, a shirt hung to air. Perhaps someone remarks that he smells of the dairy, and perhaps everyone is used to it. The job enters domestic life through laundry, tiredness, wages, and the schedule of meals. Most working histories are like this. They are not sealed inside the workplace. They come home in cloth, skin, appetite, and silence. The next morning, he returns. That repetition is not a failure of storytelling. It is the story. A quiet job becomes visible through recurrence. Once is a description. Many times is a life. The Scaldman's skill, fatigue, pride, irritation, patience, and knowledge all require repetition to exist. Without repetition, there is no craft in the task, only an action. With repetition, The action becomes a station in the city's daily rhythm. By the time the old roll began fading, he may have repeated the motions thousands upon thousands of times, though we keep numbers in words and let them remain soft. Countless is often truer in a bedtime story than a precise figure. Countless rinses, countless lids, countless drops falling from can rims into the same drain, not because the count is unknowable in principle, but because the experience of the work is not numerical. It is rhythmic, accumulated, and bodily. The lost Scaldman also asks us to notice how improvements can make memory cleaner than life was. Modern milk reaches us with little trace of the wet work behind it. The container is fresh, the label neat, the smell controlled. That is a success, but clean convenience can flatten the imagination. It can make us forget that daily nourishment once required rooms full of steam, workers with damp sleeves, and heavy vessels restored again and again. Tonight, we let that older texture return. Texture is one of the main gifts of forgotten work. The rough brush handle, the slick lid edge, the warm fog on the face, the gritty place where floor meets drain, the stiff apron, the hollow metal ring. These textures keep history from becoming only dates and systems. We can place our attention on them gently, and the mind does not need to chase anything. It can settle into the room the way steam settles on glass. The Scaldman's day may include small acts of economy that belong to a careful workplace. Water not wasted, heat not lost, cloths used until they are truly worn, damaged cans set aside before they spoil a load, soap measured by habit. These acts are neither miserly nor romantic. They are the practical discipline of a place where materials cost money and delays cost trust. A worker who knows this discipline helps the dairy survive, even if no one names his contribution beyond the station. Economy also shaped the persistence of the milk can. A strong can could serve a long time if maintained. That durability gave the Scaldman work. When containers became lighter, more standardized, or disposable in later forms, the economics of cleaning shifted. It could become cheaper or safer to change the vessel system altogether than to maintain the old cycle. The Scaldman's loss was therefore not only technological, but economic, tied to how societies decide what is worth washing, repairing, returning, or replacing. Those decisions are rarely felt as theories by the worker. They arrive as new purchases, altered schedules, and different objects on the floor. The first time fewer large cans come back, perhaps nobody thinks much of it. The first time a new line handles what hands once handled. The room still needs people. Only gradually does the balance tip. Then the old skills become occasional rather than daily, and occasional skills are vulnerable. They no longer form a full day's identity. A full day's identity matters. To say someone is the milk and Scaldman is to say the day knows where to find him. He has a station, a rhythm, and a responsibility. When the task becomes only one part of a broader rotation, the identity loosens. That may be good for flexibility, but it changes the worker's relationship to the object. The can no longer has one primary guardian at the trough. It passes through a system, and the system holds responsibility more diffusely. Diffuse responsibility can be strong when well designed. It can also feel impersonal. The old Scaldman's care was personal, because his body met the vessel directly. The newer dairy's care was institutional, because many design steps worked together. Both forms can be honorable. Our purpose tonight is not to rank them, but to feel the older one while it is still warm in imagination. We are standing at the point where personal care and public sanitation overlap. The afternoon air outside the dairy may carry lake moisture, especially on certain days when weather sits low over Zurich. That dampness enters the washroom differently from steam. It is cooler, broader, less scented with work. When the door opens, you can sense the lake even if you cannot see it. The city's water and the dairy's water meet only as feeling, one outside and one inside, both shaping the day. The Scaldman's hands belong to the inside water. Water outside moves by geography. Water inside moves by labor. One flows through river and lake. The other pours, scalds, rinses, drains, and is replaced. This contrast is gentle enough to sleep beside. It reminds us that a city contains many kinds of motion, some natural, some built, some guided by hand. The milk and Scaldman works with the guided kind, drawing heat and cleanliness through a vessel so that morning's nourishment can make its next circuit. The circuit continues even when weather complicates it. Rain makes the yard slick. Snow slows transport. Fog softens sound and wets the can lids before they reach the door. Summer heat presses urgency into the morning. The Scaldman's room responds to each condition, though the task remains recognizable. This is one of the quiet pleasures of following old work closely. Repetition does not erase variation. It reveals variation, because the same task performed under different conditions teaches you what conditions mean. A rainy day might make the washroom feel less separate from the outside. Everything is damp, inside and out, but in different temperatures. Boots bring in grit. Coats hang heavy. The windows are dimmer. Water on cans is not always from washing now. Some comes from the weather. You learn to distinguish rainwater from residue by smell and placement. The Scaldman does this without ceremony, sorting the world's wetness into what matters for the task. On a dry winter morning, the opposite problem appears. The outside air is sharp, and the first steam feels almost luxurious against the face. Metal contracts into cold obedience. Handles bite through cloth. The scalding trough becomes the room's hearth, though no one sits beside it for comfort alone. You work near heat, and heat gives back some kindness, even while demanding respect. The Scaldman's cheeks may redden from the alternation of cold yard air and hot washroom steam. The body adapts, but never completely. That is the truth of manual work, across seasons. There is always some edge of discomfort to negotiate. Wet cuffs, cold fingers, tired shoulders, warm air that makes the head feel heavy. Yet the work continues, and over time the worker's identity may include that negotiation. He knows himself partly as the person who can keep the cans moving in any weather. Not heroically, just steadily, which is often more useful. The dairy's schedule may be tied to markets, households, and institutional customers. Cafes, schools, hospitals, or kitchens might depend on reliable supply. Again, the Scaldman is one step behind the visible delivery, but his work supports all of it. The empty can at his trough may tomorrow carry milk toward a kitchen where soup is made for many people. The vessel's next use is unknown to him in detail, but not in kind. It will carry something needed. That is enough. Knowing that something is needed gives quiet weight to a repetitive task. A worker may not think about every customer, but he knows the dairy is not producing ornaments. Milk spoils if mishandled. Children drink it. Cooks rely on it. Families budget for it. The can must be ready because the city's ordinary life is ready to ask for it again. We can feel that usefulness without making it grand. It sits in the room like a warm lamp, steady and low. The Scaldman station may also have been a place where errors from elsewhere became visible. A farm that failed to rinse after emptying. A driver who left lids exposed. A shop that delayed returns. The washroom receives the consequences, and the Scaldman reads them first. This can make the job frustrating. It can also give the worker a practical authority. He knows which habits upstream make downstream work harder. His complaints, if made, are rooted in contact with the object. In a well-run system, such observations travel back, a note to a driver, a word to a supplier, a changed instruction. Cleanliness improves because information flows along with cans. The Scaldman is part of that information flow, even if he never sits in the office. His nose, hands, and eyes supply data before data is called data. The room's sensory knowledge becomes operational knowledge when someone listens. In this way, the humble trough participates in the city's broader effort to manage food safely. As dairies became more technically organized, that information flow likely became more formal. Tests, records, and inspections captured what handworkers had long noticed in less standardized ways. Formality can protect knowledge from being ignored. It can also make older workers feel that what they know has been taken out of their hands and placed on paper. Both feelings can be true. The Scaldman's world sits exactly at that crossing, where lived habit and written procedure begin to overlap. The overlap may show itself in a thermometer near the trough, a simple instrument perhaps, but one that changes authority. The worker still feels heat, but now the number confirms or corrects the feeling. He may trust both. If the number seems wrong, he may tap the glass or question it. If his hand says the water is cooling, and the instrument agrees, the rule becomes action. Heat is adjusted, the can waits. The day continues with slightly more certainty than before. Instruments do not remove the senses, they converse with them. A thermometer cannot smell sour residue. A worker's nose cannot give an exact temperature. Together they make better practice. This partnership is part of industrial modernity at its best, not a sudden break from the past. The Zurich milk can Scaldman, standing by the trough in the 1920s, may well have worked in such a blended world, where old bodily knowledge and newer measurements shared the same damp air. The can he lifts now is older than most. You can tell from its weight and the softened edges of its marks. It has a broad dent near the lower side, not deep enough to condemn it, but enough to require attention. The brush goes there first, bristles press into the curve, water follows. The scalding heat is allowed to reach the dent longer, because hidden places deserve time. When it emerges, you inspect it twice, not anxiously, only carefully. Careful work has a different pace from worried work. Worry jerks the hand. Care steadies it. The Scaldman's best work comes from care. He knows the problem spots, handles them, and moves on. There is no need to dramatize the dent. There is only the right response. That is one reason this kind of narration can be restful. The world presents small difficulties, and the worker answers them with practiced motions, one at a time, without raising the temperature of the story. A younger listener might wonder how such a narrow job could fill a day. The answer is volume, return, and the stubborn nature of residue. A city's milk supply creates many vessels, and each vessel creates surfaces. Surfaces take time. Lids multiply the work. Sorting adds more. Drying requires space. Damage requires judgment. Cleaning rooms require cleaning themselves. By the time all of that is done, the day has filled itself completely. Not with variety in the obvious sense, but with layered repetition. Layered repetition is different from monotony. Monotony is what an outsider may see. Layered repetition is what the worker experiences, when each can vary slightly. Each hour changes light and smell. Each season alters urgency, and each tool has its own condition. The Scaldman's day may have been tiring, but it was not blank. It contained enough small differences to keep skill alive. We notice those differences now, and the work opens, slowly, like a door into an ordinary room. The ordinary room may have a clock whose hands grow misted by steam. Someone wipes it occasionally, or simply learns to read it through the haze. The hour matters, but not with sharp suspense. Milk work has schedules, yet within those schedules the Scaldman's motions stay even. A half-asleep listener can hear the clock as part of the background, a soft reminder that the day is moving, not racing. Time in the washroom is measured by both minutes and completed vessels. Completed vessels accumulate behind him. Dirty vessels wait before him. This gives the room a visible past and future. Behind, the clean row. Ahead, the work still asking. In the middle, the worker's hands. Many jobs have this structure, and it can be comforting because it makes progress tangible. You can see what has been done. You can see what remains. You do not need to solve the entire day at once. You only need to bring the next can through the crossing. The crossing is wet and warm. Rinse to brush. Brush to scald. Scald to drain. Drain to air. Air to storage. Storage to root. Each stage has its own little threshold. The Scaldman moves the vessel across them with quiet authority. If one threshold is rushed, the next suffers. If the can is not drained well, drying slows. If drying is incomplete, storage becomes doubtful. The sequence teaches that care is not one act, but a chain of acts held together. This chain is exactly what larger dairy systems later formalized. Separate rooms, designated flows, controlled washing, mechanical drying, documented checks. The Scaldman's old sequence did not disappear as an idea. It was expanded, divided, enclosed, and mechanized. That is why the loss is subtle. The heart of the work continued, but the person whose day was shaped by the full tactile sequence became harder to find. He was absorbed into the chain he had once embodied. The word absorbed feels right for this kind of industrial change. Not erased in a sudden sweep, but taken into something larger. The Scaldman's motions became machine motions. His judgments became rules and checks. His station became part of a plant layout. His local name became a general category. Absorption can be beneficial and still make a human figure fade. We can hold that gently, because history is full of such fading, and tonight we are practicing attention to one of them. Attention returns us to the can now draining on the rack. The drops have slowed. At first they fell rapidly, then in separate beads, now only from one stubborn point near the rim. You watch the last drop gather, swell, and fall. It lands without importance, yet it completes something. Another can be shifted. Another lid can be placed. The room's order advances by these tiny permissions, each granted by water leaving metal. A good worker respects drying because trapped moisture can undo effort. This is true beyond dairies. Laundry, printing, woodworking, brewing, and many other trades know the value of waiting for dampness to depart. The Scaldman belongs to that broad fellowship of people who understand that water is helpful until it is not. It cleans, carries, and cools, then must be removed. The line between enough and too much is learned through touch, smell, and time. The afternoon has a lower light now, and the steam seems less white, more grey. The day is moving toward its softer edge. The Scaldman may begin to think of final tasks, though not yet of leaving. There are still cans to finish. There is still the trough to tend. There are still lids to match. But the room's mood has shifted from receiving to completing. You feel this in the shoulders, in the way people step, in the slightly longer pauses between sounds. Completion in a workplace is rarely absolute. There is always something that could be improved, wiped again, arranged better, checked twice. A worker learns the difference between proper completion and endless fussing. The Scaldman knows when a can is clean enough because clean enough has a real standard, not a careless one. He knows when the room is ready to be left because morning will reveal any laziness. This knowledge keeps the closing routine calm rather than obsessive. The closing routine is another job inside the job, tools rinsed. Brushes hung, waste cleared, trough attended, clean cans arranged, damaged pieces noted, floor washed where needed, door secured. Each act prepares the next day. You could say the Scaldman ends the day by making tomorrow possible, just as he spends the day making each can ready for its next filling. Preparation repeats at different scales, vessel by vessel, room by room, day by day. When he rinses the brush at day's end, the water running from it may be almost clear. The bristles spread under the flow, then gather when shaken. He hangs it where air can reach it, because a brush left wet and closed becomes its own problem. Tools that clean must themselves be cleaned. This simple fact links the Scaldman to every maintenance worker in every era. Care extends backward to the tools of care, and there is always another layer. The hook, too, may be wiped and set aside. Its metal has touched hot water all day, but it still gathers residue from handles and rims. The grip may be wood, worn, and dark at the place where fingers close. You place it on its peg, and it swings slightly before coming to rest. That small swing is an evening sound. It says the lifting is done for now, though not forever. The peg holds the tool in readiness, just as the rack held the cans. The floor receives the last attention because everything else has fallen toward it. Splashes, drips, loosened residue, soap, dust, and the scuff of boots all meet there. You rinse toward the drain, guiding water with broom or squeegee, watching it gather and vanish. The floor brightens as the film lifts. It will not stay clean forever. That is understood. Clean enough for the night is the aim. Morning will bring new wetness, new cans, new use. There is deep calm in work that accepts return. The Scaldman does not defeat dirt once for all. He meets it daily. He does not make cans permanently clean. He restores them for the next journey. He does not end the cycle. He serves it. This kind of acceptance can be soothing because it does not pretend life can be made final. It says that care is something we do again and again, with the tools available and the time given. By evening, the dairy's other rooms may still have their own tasks, but the washroom's strongest work has passed. The air cools from the top down. Steam thins near the ceiling. A window opened earlier now lets in the city's damp breath. You hear more of the street than before, because the trough is quieter. A tram bell comes through clearly, then fades. Somewhere nearby, a door closes with the soft firmness of a place ending its business for the day. The scaldman may stand for a moment without a can in his hands. That emptiness can feel strange after hours of wait. The arms seem to remember lifting and do not immediately know what to do with rest. He may flex his fingers, wipe his palms, or press a thumb into the base of the opposite hand. The body checks itself after labor. It finds the sore places, the warm places, the small burns avoided, the damp cuffs, the steady tiredness that means the shift has been real. He may look at the rows of prepared cans before leaving, not in pride as a speech, but in the practical satisfaction of seeing the room set right. The lids are where they should be. The racks are not crowded with hidden damp. The damaged pieces are not mixed in with the good. Tomorrow's first worker will not curse tonight's carelessness. That is a quiet form of kindness between shifts, even if the same man returns before dawn. Between shifts, the room rests in darkness or low light. The cans cool completely. The smell settles into metal, wet stone, and faint soap. Drops hidden in corners finally dry. The brush bristles stiffen slightly in the air. The trough loses its heat. If anyone enters late, the room will feel emptied of its daytime weather, as though the steam were a visitor that has gone home. We can imagine the stillness without making it an ending, because the cycle is only sleeping. The city sleeps unevenly around it. Some windows go dark early, others burn late. Trams slow, kitchens quiet. Somewhere, milk already meant for the next day is being considered, gathered or planned. Cows shift in barns outside the city. Drivers know when they must rise. The dairy's locked doors hold the clean cans in their rows. The scaldman, wherever he rests, remains tied to that future by habit, because his morning will begin where the city's need begins. Before dawn, the room will be cold again. That is the truth of warmth made by labor. It must be remade. The boiler will be coaxed back. Water will heat. Steam will climb. The first can will arrive with the chill of the outside on its handle. You can almost feel that handle now, even before it comes. The scaldman's work lives in this returning anticipation, the knowledge that readiness is temporary and therefore precious. The first sounds of the new day are small: a key, a latch, a footstep crossing the yard, perhaps a cough in cold air. Then the door opens, and the room receives its worker. He may pause to take in the state left from yesterday. A clean room greets him differently from a careless one. He knows at once where the evening was done properly. The floor, rack, tools, and trough all report in their quiet language, and he begins with whatever they tell him. A worker who returns to his own properly closed room begins with less resistance. The brush is where it should be. The hook hangs ready. The racks have space. The drain is clear. These things save energy before the heavy work begins. We can feel the kindness of yesterday's order reaching into today. The scaldman, intending the room at night, has cared for his own morning self as well as for the dairy. Many old routines contain that hidden self-kindness. The incoming cans will break the stillness soon, but not yet. There is a brief interval when the room belongs only to preparation. Water begins to move. Heat enters pipes. A cloth is folded. A sleeve is rolled. The worker's hands test the day's first surfaces. This interval may be the calmest part of the shift, and tonight we can linger in it. Nothing has piled up. Nothing has soured in the room. The day is only a shape about to be filled. Then the yard stirs, and the first group of cans appears at the threshold. Their arrival turns preparation into action. One is set down too hard and gives a flat, offended note. Another rolls slightly until a boot stops it. Lids clatter in a smaller rhythm. The driver's coat carries the smell of outside morning, wool, rain, or frost, depending on the season. The scaldman nods, perhaps says something brief, and reaches for the first vessel. The The circle has found its starting point again. In that reach, the whole lost job becomes visible. The bent elbow, the wet floor, the patient trough, the metal cold from travel, the city waking beyond the door, the knowledge that this vessel must not remain as it is. We follow the hand because the hand is where history becomes specific. It closes around the handle, feels the weight, and begins the old change from empty used to empty ready. The can tips and the last thread of yesterday's milk slides toward the drain.